What's up, Notjust developers? Welcome back to a new live stream. Today, we're gonna build a full stack stock tracker application where we will be able to search for different stock symbols, track their prices, and we're gonna do that in React Native Expo using GraphQL and IBM StepZen. The features that our application is going to include by the end of this tutorial are going to be finding and viewing stock details, and for that we want to use real market data by using an external API, and we want to also see the stock performance on a graph. Today we're going to learn how to integrate charts and graph in React Native and how we can map the progress and the performance of a stock on a graph. We're also going to implement features like adding a stock to your favorite, and for that we're going to learn more about databases, how we can store information there, so that you can take this project to the next level and adding even more custom features around finances and stock tracking. This is a great application to learn more about React Native, learn more about full stack mobile development, because we're going to do everything in this single tutorial from the beginning all the way till we have a working application both on front end and the back end. It's also a great application, a starting point if you are planning to build a financial application. For example, I'm going to use the feature that we're going to build today in my own application that I have on the market, which is a finance application. So yeah, if you also are interested in that, make sure to follow the tutorial till the end to learn more about this. From the tech stack, on the front end, we're going to use React Native with Expo SDK 50 and of course Expo router for the navigation. On the back end, we're going to build a custom GraphQL API using IBM StepZen that is going to connect to different data sources. On one hand, it's going to connect with an external API that is going to provide us real-time data about stocks. And on the other hand, is going to connect with a custom PostgreSQL database that we're going to deploy also today for managing custom features like saving to favorites or even tracking customly users' portfolio. This video is brought to you by IBM StepZen, and if you're not familiar with IBM StepZen, we've used in multiple projects, and every time I have to build a GraphQL API, I start with IBM StepZen because it's really easy and simple to get started, and all we have to do is run a single command line command, and everything else is taken care by StepZen. You're gonna see more about them in today's video, where we will build our custom GraphQL API, and thank you very much StepZen for sponsoring this video. Before we start, I want to mention that I have prepared the asset bundle, as I usually do, that will help you move along easier. So make sure to download that by going to assets.notjust.dev/stocks. And after you go there, I will also have it somewhere. Let me check it. Yeah, after you go there, first of all, there is a stock application guide file that you're gonna see in this asset bundle. Go ahead and open it up, and this should open a step-by-step guide that will help you, and you can use it as a to-do list to know, like, to track your progress by building this application. So it contains the user stories, it contains the instructions on how to set up a project, build the UI, implement the charts, build the API, fetch the data, and bonus chapter at the end for custom database. So make sure to set it up. We're gonna follow it step by step, and we're gonna do everything together in this tutorial. Here I also have a very short overview of the end result that we're gonna have. Where is it? Here. So on the home screen, we're gonna have a list of stocks. We're also going to be able to search for custom symbols. And after going to the details page, we're gonna query the data about it. We're gonna display more information here. We have a lot of info that we can display on this screen, so this is not exactly how it is going to look at the end, but a good overview of what we're gonna have. At the bottom, we're gonna have a chart to see the time series, and also we're gonna be able to move from different time frames. And the other tab is going to be specific for the favorites, where we will be able to favorite a stock by pressing the star button so that we can keep track of it. So this is our application, and if you're ready, let's get started. All right, guys. So let me know, as usual, where you're joining us from in the live chat. I'm going to say hi to everyone in a moment, but let's go ahead and start by initializing our Expo project. Again, this is our first step in the guide. We have to create an Expo project, and to do that, I'm going to open up a terminal. And from environment variable, if you're just getting started with Expo, you really don't have to have much installed on your environment to build this project because of Expo. So the only thing that you need is going to be Node with npx, and that is going to be the minimum that you're gonna need. I'm gonna show you in a moment what exactly we're gonna do. So I'm going to navigate to a folder where I keep all my projects. Let's do it like this. This is 02, clear. And let's go ahead and initialize a blank Expo project. We're gonna do that using npx command, and we're gonna use the create expo app tool. And npx will check if you already have this tool installed. It will use it from your cache. If not, it will go ahead and install it. So that's why we don't really have to have anything installed to get started. I also like to add the at latest in order to take the latest version of Create Expo application, and let's give our application the name stocks. And we can go like this, but I prefer to go with a template for this project, and to do that, we're gonna do -t tabs. Let's choose the tabs template because it comes pre-installed with Expo router and it has already 2 tabs. So it's gonna save us a little bit of time for the configuration and for the setup, with the expense of having like some folders and files initially that I'm gonna have to explain you, like not to get confused by everything. But we're gonna take it step by step. So while our application is being initialized, let me check the live chat. How are you doing, guys? Hey, we have a new channel member. Thank you very much, Karen Beer. Buzz, hello. Buzz is saying your tutorial builds are really helpful. Get me into app development. I'm really happy that you found them valuable. I appreciate that. If you guys are on your way of becoming a mobile developer, if you're interested in React Native and Expo, make sure to subscribe to the channel because we have a lot of project build tutorials that can help you learn and master app development with these technologies by building really fun projects. So a subscribe will really help us reach more developers like you. And yeah, thank you very much. Hello, Julio. Hello, Comedy Tech Motivate. Sniper. Red, how are you doing, guys? Bill from San Jose, USA. Eduardo from Brazil. Nice. All right. So if we look in our terminal, we see that our project is ready. It was initialized in a folder where we have it there. So all I have to do is open it in Visual Studio Code. I will do that by running code and the name of a folder, or you can simply open Visual Studio Code manually and do open folder from there. Also, you can use any other editor of your choice. In my case, that's Visual Studio Code. So here it is. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see it as well. Before we jump into the folders and files, I will open a terminal. So let's go to the top, terminal, new terminal, or use the shortcut. And here, let's run npm start to start the development server. In your case, it shouldn't ask you because I already have another application going. After the development server is started, I'm gonna press I as we can see here, to open on iOS simulator, but to open it on iOS simulator, you need to be working on a macOS system and you need to have Xcode installed. Alternatively, if you're working on Windows or Linux, you will have the possibility to install an Android emulator using Android Studio, and you're gonna be able to press A to open on Android. This project is gonna work both on iOS and Android, so everything is gonna work. Even though I'm gonna test mostly on iOS, it should work everything the same on Android. However, these emulators and simulators, they require some additional setup like Xcode and Android Studio. If you don't have that on your machine, that's not a problem. There is an even easier option. All you have to do, if you don't have those, download the Expo Go application on your physical device, being Android or iOS, from the market. And after you install the application, go ahead and scan this QR code, and the application will start on your physical device, so you can continue building and testing it this way. After it loads, you should see the application that I have here on the right. So we have two tabs. The first one with some information, we have a second tab, and on the first one we have even a button in the header that will open a model. This is all that is included in the tabs template. And if we have a look at our folder structure, everything starts with the app directory. This is the directory responsible for our navigation for our router, and this is specific for Expo router. Expo router is a file-based navigation system. It's a new way of handling routing in Expo and React Native applications, and I highly encourage you to learn it if you haven't already. All we have to do is, for example, create folders and tabs here, and folders and files, and our screens are automatically created for us. So if we look in the tabs directory, we have here the index and that tab, a file called 2. These are the two tabs that we see here. By simply copy pasting the tab 2 to tab 3, we're gonna see automatically a new tab appear in our bottom stack here. So that's how simple it is to add a new screen to our application. Of course, I'm gonna delete it because I don't need it. I just wanted to show you a quick overview and the benefit of Expo router. There is another folder that we're gonna work with. This is the components. That's where we will put our custom components that we want to reuse in our application. So make sure that if we are building a screen, that should go into the app directory. If the component is not a screen, it should go into the components folder. And that's it. That's the most important stuff for this moment. In the constants, there are some colors, but we're gonna learn about them as we go. I think we can continue like this, but I really like to, so we have this one done, we have import, to clean up the template. I really like to have everything in my application that is related to the source code in a folder called source. So let's go ahead and create this folder in our project called SRC, because I want to show you like some of the best practices that is going to serve you well in your career. And in this SRC directory, let's go ahead and move, first of all, the app directory. This is our Expo router. So this is the first one. Then we're going to move the components. Make sure to drop it under the source, not under the app, but under the source. Move. Yes. And also let's move the constants here. So at the moment in our source directory, we should have app, components, and constants. This is the source code of our application. Everything else is configuration, assets, and so on. We're gonna see that our project already stopped working, and that's because some of the relative paths that we have created, they are broken. For example, the first one we're gonna find in the tsconfig. In the tsconfig, we have here a path alias which helps us import easier components. For example, if I look into the application index, we see that we are importing the edit screen info, which is a custom component, by doing add source. And I think in this situation for me it is going to work. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it like this anyway. Let's go ahead and do the following. Let's restart our development server for the new location of app directory to take effect. For that, open the terminal and press Ctrl+C to stop the existing server. And now let's do it. Let's run npm start again, but this time we're gonna add -- clear to clear the Metro bundler. This will make sure to clear the cache so that the new folder structure take effect. Now if I press I to run on iOS, here if I press reload, we will see an error, but we're gonna fix that together. The error that I see is related to the relative paths to the font, to assets font. That is coming from our application _layout, and if you scroll down a bit, you should see the relative path to the assets. The problem is that we moved the application and the source directory, so now our assets are 2 directories up. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of going once in the parent directory, I'm gonna go twice in the parent directory, and only then I'm gonna go into the assets. Now, if I'm gonna simply reload the application without having to restart anything, we should see everything working as it was working before. If you still have any issues, then make sure that where we import with add, in my case, it automatically rename from add to add source. So this was done for me automatically. If it hasn't automatically renamed it, and if it remained like this, you'll see some syntax error like this. So either go into these files that show you the error and add the -source, or even a better one, but in your case, like if that happens, if it didn't rename, I would go ahead in the tsconfig and here add a -source for the path alias, and that would mean that every time we're gonna use @/ it's going to look into the source directory. I'm not going to do that for this project if it was renamed, and for me it was renamed, so I think it's going to be even easier to leave it like this, because now for me everything is working, and I hope for you as well. Hopefully I didn't confuse you too much right now with these changes, but it's really going to help us keep our code structured and everything in the same place. So yeah, that was our cleaning up a little bit our files. We're actually not done with cleaning yet. I really want to make sure to clean like the things that we really don't need, because they make things harder to work with. I'm gonna start with going into the tabs index, and this is the file that is responsible for tab 1. As you can see here, it says tab 1. So if I'm gonna say hello, it will automatically update it here. Hello, very weird hello that I put here. Anyway, what I want to do here is I want to remove all the content inside this container. And because we removed all the content, I will also remove the styles for title and separator, and maybe even these align items and justify content, and leave only a view with that has the styles of a container. We should see a dark screen, but that's good because that's going to be where we will start working. From the imports, I can remove the edit screen info component, and I can also remove a text, but most probably we're gonna need it later, so let's leave it like here for a moment. Let's do the same cleaning in the tab 2. So let's go to tab 2 and remove these 3 components inside our container, and the title and separator styles together with align items and justify content. Let's also remove the import of edit screen info. And if we do a search edit screen info, we will see that we still have imported it in the model. So let's go and clean up the model as well. I'm gonna go into the application model file. Here we again see the title, we see the view and edit screen info. Let's delete them. I will leave the status bar for a moment. Actually, I will leave it. I will only delete the styles and this flex align and so on, and the import of the edit screen info. Now, if I will do a search in the whole directory for edit screen info, we see that we never use this edit screen info component in our application, so we can safely go ahead and remove it from the components folder. This way, we're gonna keep our project cleaner. Now, our application should work as it was working before because that file is no longer used. I think the external link as well we're not using. So if I do a search over the whole application for external link, yes, it's only declared here. So unless you're gonna need some external links, or maybe we're gonna need external link. Let's leave it there. And everything else, I will leave it like this. Perfect. Let's go ahead and in that terminal, I'm going to do a commit, git add, git commit, init up and clean template. That's git status. What's going git status? Yeah, perfect. You're gonna have access to the source code as well, so you can check different commits that we're gonna do today. So that's why in a lot of cases I like to start from a clean template and add only the things that I need. But now with a little bit of cleaning, we have a pretty good base to get started. And before we move on, I want to also import the data from the asset bundle into our assets. So after you downloaded the asset bundle, here besides the guide, you're also going to see this data folder. Let's go ahead and simply drag and drop the data folder under our assets. We're going to need this data later when we will start building the UI, because it contains some default information or some dummy data that we can use to build our UI and not think about the API. And this way we can start focusing on the UI and later focusing on the API. So now that we have our data, I'm going to go ahead and do a commit, and then we can move on. Come on. Git add. Add dummy data. Perfect. So, how are you doing, guys? Following along? Hello from Italy. Hello, Gianni. Hello, Jack. Super excited for this one. Rogelio, how are you doing? Yes. So, now that we have our template clean, let's go ahead and see what is going to be our next step. The next step is going to be to start rendering a list of stocks. So rendering a list of stocks, we're going to do that on the home screen, on the first tab, and they should look something like this. The name of the symbol, the name, and some information about the price and how much it changed, like the change. Let's do that, and we're going to do that together. The data that we are going to use to render a list of stocks is going to come from the data top 5. This data top 5 contains, it's not even an array, it's an object with different tickers, with different symbols. For example, IBM with this name, with this data about like the price at the lowest, at the highest in this period, at the close, and all of this information like for other tickers as well. So what I'm gonna do is, let's go ahead in our application tabs and let's go into the index. The index is our tab 1 here that we see. If you want to rename it from tab 1 to something else, what we can do is we can use the stack imported from Expo router, stack.screen, close this tag right away. And by sending here some options that are coming from React Navigation, we can change the title. So the title can be stocks. This way, at the top, we see stocks. At the bottom in the tab, we also see stocks. Another way would be to look into the layout, because in this layout is where we configure our tab layout, our tab bar. So instead of here we see tab 1, we can rename it right away here, stocks. And for the tab bar icon, let's see, where is it coming from? Tab bar icon is a font awesome item. So, I don't know, $? Do you have something like this? Yes, it has $. Okay, that's nice. We can start with a $sign here. So going back to our index, here is where we are going to render our stock details. For example, by simply rendering a text here, hello world, we're gonna see it at the top, hello world. Okay. Let's go ahead and first, usually the way I do it is first I build one small component. For example, I start by building one component that renders a stock information or one row, and then I put them in a flat list. Now I want to start by building a very simple flat list, and after that building the details of one stock list item. If you're interested in more and learning more about flat list, I have previous Tuesday, we have done a very in-depth tutorial about flat lists. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to import a flat list from React Native, flat list, and a flat list needs some data. So the data that we're gonna use is going to come from our assets data, and here top 5. Yes, the top 5. So let's import top 5 from add assets data and then top5.json. If I'm gonna go ahead and start by console logging the top 5, or in a way you can see this even in the JSON file. The top 5 JSON is not an array, but flat lists work with an array. So what I can do is I can transform these different values of our object. I can transform them to an array by simply doing here const stocks equal to object.values, and by passing here an object, for example, top 5 is an object, top 5 is an object, object.values is going to return us an array that contains our values of this object. So now if I'm gonna do console log stocks, we're gonna see that it in fact is an array and it contains our values that are information about a stock price. So that means that we can use this array in a flat list to render the list of our stocks. So let's go ahead and start by rendering a flat list. And a flat list requires has two required properties. One of them is the data, which should be an array. So we're gonna use our stocks. That's why we transformed it to an array using object.values. And it also has a render item function that is a function which will be called for every single item in this array, and we need to tell flat list how do we want to render one item. So what I'm gonna do is I will render a hello world text for every item from our stocks array. What we should see on the screen is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hello world, because that's how many items we have in our top5.json. If instead of hello world, I'm going to dynamically take the item.name, in this situation we should see the name of the different stocks that we have here, starting with IBM, Apple, Meta, Amazon, and Alphabet. So that's the simplest way that we can use a flat list. And again, if you are interested, check out the tutorial. If you're interested to learn more about the flat lists, if you go to our channel under the live, there is this infinite scroll list. So it teaches a lot in depth about how to work and how to build infinite scrollable flat lists. So check it out if the flat list is still something that you need help with. Now that we have this flat list that can render a simple text for every item, what I want to do is I want to extract this part of rendering one line to a custom component. To do that, let's go ahead and start by creating a new component in our components folder. And I'm gonna create a new file, and I'm gonna call it stock list item.tsx. A custom component is nothing more than a function. So it can be a function declared with a function keyword or even an arrow function. It doesn't really matter how, it's mostly preferences. So I'm gonna start with function called stock list item. And what makes this component is the fact that it should return some JSX. It should return something to render on the screen. For example, in this case, I can start again from hello world. And we depend on this text component. So let's go ahead and import text. We can either import it from React Native, but this template of Expo that we are using, it already contains a file called themed, which extends our usual text component from React Native. It extends it and it adds a color based on the color scheme. So it's going to work both for dark mode and light mode. You don't have to understand a lot of things from here. The text coming from themed file is going to work in a similar way as the normal text. The only difference is that the color will change depending on the color scheme. So the last thing what we have to do here is we need to export default this function in order to be able to import it in our parts of our application and use it to render something on the screen. We need this stock list item in our application tabs index inside the flat list. So to use it, let's first import the stock list item from our source component stock list item, and let's render it instead of a text. I will render it like this as a self-closing tag because it doesn't need any children. So right away we see hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world. Well, hello world is not something that we want to render. We need some information about the item that we are currently rendering. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pass to the stock list item through properties, a property called stock, and the value of this stock is going to come from the item because we know that this item contains information. It's an object containing information about one specific item that is being rendered, and it contains the symbol, name, and so on. So by sending this item to our stock list item through the stock property, we can go into our stock list item and we can receive it as a property here by destructuring it right away with the same name. We name this stock, we're gonna destructure it with the name stock. And now if I'm gonna do here, instead of hello world, stock.name, we should see back the names of our of our stocks. And not only the names, here we have access to everything that the stock has, like symbol, here it is, the closing price, close, like this, and so on. So that means that here is the component, and this component is responsible for rendering one row or one item in a list. Now we can focus only on this, and on the right we're gonna see how we build it. We're gonna start by structuring it, and then we're gonna style it together. At this moment we still see that TypeScript is not very happy that we didn't specify what type should our properties of stock list item should be. To specify this type, we will start by creating a type here, and to create the type for the properties of a component, I like to call it with the same name as a component. And it's allowed because one is a type and one is a function. So stock list item will have the next properties. One of them is going to be stock, for example. And what values will it have? Well, the values is going to be stock, for example. Not like this, but a type called stock. We don't have yet defined a type called stock, so we can define it here. Type stock is going to have, for example, name of type string. I should do equal. I forgot equal here and equal here as well. So now we define our stock type, we define our stock list item properties type. Well, the last step is to take these property types and to put here double dots and say that, hey, this object is of type stock list item, which means that it contains a stock and a stock contains a name. So TypeScript here complains that there is no close, but there will be a name because we said that, hey, there is a name of type string. So we're gonna add here in this stock type the other fields that we're gonna need from the whole object here. In a best way, like we could add everything, but we don't need at the moment everything. What we're gonna need is the symbol, the name, the close, and the percent and change. As we can see, the close and percent and change, even though they are numbers, in the API they will be returned as strings. So let's go to our stock list item here and say that besides the name, we're gonna have a symbol, also of type string. We're gonna have a close, also of type string, and we're gonna have a percentage change, also of type string. So now we have access to the name, we have access to the symbol, we have access to the close, and we have access to the percentage change. We see that it's not there, so that most probably means that I made a percent change. I made a typo, so it should be percent change. And let's change here percent change. Yes, it is. Perfect. Let's go ahead one step back in our tabs index. And I want to add a little bit of space between the items in our flat list. One way would be to add padding to our stock list item, but a better way would be adding a property gap on the flat list that will add this gap between the items. So I'm gonna put the data, the render item from a new line like this, and I will add a new property to the flat list called content. Container style. These are the style that is going to be applied on the container that wraps around our stock list items, our items. So by adding here a gap 10, we are adding spaces between items. So 20 is going to add it like this. So I might start with a gap 20 and then later adjust it the way we need. I also, on the content container style, I can add here a padding 10, and this will add padding around our flat list. Perfect. that now that we have a little bit of spacing, it's going to be more clear which are the different items. So let's go to the stock list item and start building this component. We have created and set up the whole structure of a component. Now it's time to build them and render the component as we can see here in the user interface. For that, let's go ahead and start by rendering, by defining the structure, rendering things, and then slowly adding styles. I'm gonna start with the left column where we have the symbol with blue and below it the name of the symbol. So let's start with stock.symbol. This is IBM, Apple, Meta, and so on. And below it, we need to have another text that contains the name. Sometimes you might think that, hey, by simply adding here another text with stock.name, that's how it should work. But the problem is that the rule of thumb is a component should render only one parent component. In this moment, it renders two components. It renders a text and a text. What we should do in this case is we should put them inside a view. So we will wrap them in a view. I will close the view at the end, and we need to import the view also from the themed file. So now the return statement contains only one item, and that item has inside it multiple of them. So the rule of thumb is return should return only one single item, because if I will want another view here, we are back to the same issue that now it has two views. So make sure to wrap it in a view, because now this view can serve as our container, right? So let's go ahead and play a little bit with the styles. To style a component, I'm gonna start with a symbol, because this one we want to make it a little bit we want to make it bold and the font size bigger. So I'm gonna start with style here, and we can style a component using inline styles like this. Simply sending font size 20 will increase the font size of our symbol. We can also do font weight bold, and now that the text will be bold. This is a way to style it, and in a lot of cases it's perfectly fine, but I recommend you to separate the rendering logic from the styling logic. To do that, we're going to import the style sheet from React Native. Below the component, we are going to define an object called styles, and we're going to create it using stylesheet.create. Stylesheet.create is going to be an object where we will keep different styles for different components here. We name them the way we want. For example, because this one is going to be the styles for a symbol, let's actually call it symbol. And it should be an object where we will write our styles. We already have the styles for our symbol, so I can copy the font size and font weight from here to our styles. And to access it, I'm going to remove an object that is in the inline styles, and make sure, pay attention at how many curly brackets we have here. Now we have two sets of curly brackets, because one of them is for the opening the JavaScript portal, and the other one is defining the object of a style. I'm gonna remove a whole object of a style, leaving only one pair of curly brackets, and I'm gonna access the styles dot symbol. Just like that, we have styles, but now they are not in line, they are separate. The same way we can add styles for container. And the styles for container we're going to apply to the parent component here, styles.container. Perfect. I'm not sure what styles we're gonna need there. Maybe we're gonna need, at the moment we don't, so let's just continue. For the color of a symbol, we can go ahead and color it with color blue. But a better way is to reuse colors and have like tokenized colors. For example, the template that we are using already have a constant with a file called colors. This file is tokenizing the colors in a way that we define all our colors that we are going to use in the project in a single file, and then we are simply referencing them from here. This way, our colors will be consistent in every screen, and whenever we will have to change them, we are going to be able to do that easily by coming here and changing it from tint color from this light blue to a darker blue. So to use them, what I'm gonna do in the stock list item, I can import colors. So for the symbol, I'm gonna use, instead of hard coding the blue here, I'm gonna use colors dot. We have dark and light colors, so I'm gonna go with light dot tint. This is going to be the blue that we define there in the colors. I don't really like this blue, and I'm going to take the one that I chose here. How to take it better? Hopefully it's this one. So let's go into the colors and change here the blue that we are using. Hope it's this one. Still I don't like it. I think I was taking it from Yahoo Finances. Did I? I was looking for here, and I think I took it. Oh, come on. So let's check this one. Yeah, that's probably better. So I'm gonna look how it works on our devices as well. Everything is nice. For the name, I'm going to simply say color.gray. Okay, that's nice. And I'm changing from dark to white with Command-Shift-A, and this works on the simulator, on the iOS emulator. I'm not sure how this works on an Android device. So far, our application supports both dark mode and light mode. Okay, guys, now that we have, in a way, completed the left part, there is also this icon, right? So the icon, I'm going to use it by searching Expo vector icons. And Expo vector icons is a library that contains a lot of icon families. So I can search here for a star, and I'm going to take the first one from Ant Design. It shows us how to import it and how to use it. Let's take the usage of Ant Design and let's render it right after the symbol here. We will also have to make sure to import Ant Design from vector icons at the top. And just like that, we have an icon, but we don't see it because it has the color black. So if it's on the white mode, it should be visible there. I'm gonna go ahead and do a color gray, and this will work both on light and dark mode. For the size, I'm gonna go with the same size as here. So maybe I'm gonna go with 16 for both, or 18. Don't remember which I use, but I will use the same size for the symbol and here. And that's it. Later on, I'm only going to change the name when we will actually press the sign button from star O to star to make it highlighted. And if in your case it puts it from two different lines and you cannot add it in the same line with a space between them, sometimes the editor will split them into two lines. and you lose this spacing between them. You can add here manually a space by opening the brackets and adding a string with a space like this. In this situation, you can add even more spaces like this. So you can manage like the spacing with simple white spaces and not having to do like anything with padding and so on. So our left side of the item is complete. Now we need to display something on the right side, and there is where we display the price and the change in percentage. So let's go ahead and start by simply rendering two text box here, where we will render the stock.price. Not the price, but stock.close. This is the price at the closing. And another one for stock.percentage change. Okay, we see them displayed on the screen, but they are right below the other two texts that we have here. What we intend to do is we intend to have, in a way, two columns. One on the left that has the name and the symbol, and on the right, which has information about the prices. To do that, we are going to actually split them into two columns, and we're going to create a column by putting them inside a view. We're going to group the first two texts inside another view, like this. And we're going to group the second two texts in another view. That will be the right container. So let's close it here. So now we see here left container, and here the right container. A view with two text, a view with two text. It's not displayed in the same row yet, because to put two components in the same row, the parent component, which in our case is styles.container, should specify the flex direction row. By default, the flex direction is column, but if we say flex direction row, they will put into the same row. Now, if we want the first view to expand, to take the full amount of space and push the right container to the right, what we can do is we can give it a style and simply say that it should have a flex1. A flex1 will tell this view, hey, take all the available space that you have in your parent container and only leave enough space for the other children, for the other siblings. For example, for the right container, leave enough space and take everything for you. So if you have here a background color red, you're going to see that the left container expands all the way till the price. Okay. Now, with this right container, what I will start by is I want to align the items to the right in order for the price and change to be aligned to the right side of the screen. To do that, I can do align items flex end, and this will move and align them to the right. Perfect. Now, let's play a little bit with them. And as you can see, because our text is coming from themed, it's automatically changing from white to black. Because otherwise, if it was coming directly from React Native, it wouldn't be doing that. So that's nice. Anyway, what do we want to do here? There is also another component in the styled text, which is called mono text. This mono text extends our theme text and only adds a font family space mono. So if in your starter, because maybe like if you're watching it after a couple of months, maybe this is not going to be here, just know that this mono text simply adds the font family space mono. So I would like to use this mono text, or maybe I can simply use the font family space mono on our close and percentage. You can do that as well by applying a style here, or we can import the mono text from style text. So let's replace close and percentage with a mono text. Now they have a different font family, like a mono spaced family, which looks more close to how a number would look. What I want to do is I don't want to show like all the digits after the dot. I want to maybe show only one digit after the dot for the price here. What I can do is I can use them a method on a number, but the problem is that our close field is a string, it's not a number, so I cannot do anything here related to numbers like toFixed 0 or toFixed, because it's not a number, it's a string. What I need to do is first I need to parse it to a string, to a number, and then do some methods on that number. To do that, I'm going to use the number dot parse float. I'm gonna give it the close string, and then I can go ahead and do toFixed. And if you do toFixed, it's going to show only the whole number. If we do toFixed 1, it's going to show one number after the dot. If you do to 2 and so on. So I'm gonna go with toFixed 1 because I want to show only one digit after the dot. And what does it say here? String is not assignable to type string. Why did I type them with a string object instead of a string with lowercase s? I don't know. But now, yeah, it doesn't complain here. So I can do the same thing for the percent change. But instead of doing it directly in line, I will actually do these calculations on the top here. I will create a variable change, and I will use number dot parse float. I'm gonna do stock dot percent change, and this is going to be already a number. And with a number, when rendering it on the screen, I can right away do dot toFixed 1. At the same time, I can use this change to apply a different color to our mono text. So let's go ahead and give it a style here. And I want to do a color red if it's negative, and I want to do a color green if it's positive. So we can add this color as a conditional to check if the change value is more than 0, question mark green. If it's more, it should be green. Otherwise, it should be red. And just like that, we see that all the numbers that are positive are with green, and all the other ones are with red. The only thing that I don't like at this moment, maybe I can do it like this because these digits are very, very small for some reason. The only thing that I want to do is for the negative numbers, we see the minus sign, but for the positive ones, we do not see the plus sign. So I want to show plus in every scenario. What I want to do is I will add another pair of brackets here before the change to fixed in order to check if change is more than 0, question mark, then I want to render a plus sign. Otherwise, I don't want to render anything. So just like that, the positive numbers will get a plus in front of them, and the negative ones will have it from the number itself and not from. We don't need to add it twice. So yeah, and lastly, I will do a percentage sign, like a text, a percentage sign after the values. So now we see percentage at the end. Should I do a space here? It's too much, so I will leave it like this. And for the text as well, you can put a $sign in front or a different currency. And just like that, we have our stock list item component that is rendering our information. What I want to do is maybe I want to add a little bit of spacing between vertical spacing between the name and the symbol, and also between the stock price and that one. So on the left container, I will add a gap here, because if I add gap 50, that's going to add spacing between the name and the symbol. So at gap 5 is going to be enough. And on the right, I think it's okay. Only on the left, like, it needed a bit of gap. So yes, just like that, we have our component and our list of stocks ready. So let's go ahead and commit our changes. Git add, git commit, and it was our rendering a list of stocks. List of stocks. Perfect. How are you doing, guys? Still following along? Where can I get the assets for these projects? The assets for these projects you can get at assets.notjust.dev/stocks. I will paste it also in the chat, asset bundle. It also contains the step-by-step guide that you saw here, that you can use to get like the to-do list and the guide that we're gonna follow. I got stuck and unable to resolve at source components edit screen info from source up tabs index. Which API will we use? We haven't used any API yet, but we are going to integrate with the TwelveData API. Where is it? Here, TwelveData. I found that TwelveData to be a very good API to provide stock information, and they also offer a free tier that includes 800 API credits per day, which is more than enough for us to get started and test our API. And I think I'm also going to use this one in my personal financial application that I have, because even like with 55 API credits per minute, the lowest, it's going to be 29 a month. I think it's quite a good pricing, because this is per minute. So unless you're doing like crazy application, like, you're not gonna have to pay a lot. But at the same time, it has a free plan that we are gonna use today. So yes, if you're just joining the tutorial, what we are doing today is we are building a stock tracker application, and we're doing that with React Native Expo. We're gonna build both the front end in React Native Expo and Expo router, and also the backend, where we will build a custom GraphQL API, a very thin layer of GraphQL API that will simply pull data from the external stock API from TwelveData that I just showed, and also is going to connect with a custom database to add custom features like saving to favorites, or maybe even tracking your personal portfolio. So everything is going to be done in today's video. We just finished the first major task, where we have a home screen in which we are rendering a list of stocks. Our next step is going to be to build to build the detailed page of our stock. So whenever I press on one of these stocks, I want to go to the details page and I want to be able to see more information about that stock. All right, so let's continue because we have a lot of things to cover today. Now that we have our first screen displaying a list of stocks, whenever a user will press on one of his stocks, I want to redirect him to the details page where he will see more information about the stock, and also later on he was going to see the graph. So that's our next task in web building the UI, to build the details page of the stock. Here we're also going to learn a little bit about Expo Router and how to manage creating screens and navigating between them. Yes. So I'm gonna start slowly add like new features of Expo Router in order not to confuse you if you're just getting started with Expo Router. So the first step is going to be to create a new screen. The new screen, all the screens in our application is in the app directory. That's how Expo Router is working. It looks into the folders and files from app directory and it builds the navigation tree. The next question is, where do we want to create it in our navigation tree? For example, when we go to the details page, do we still want to see the bottom tab navigation? If the answer is yes, that means that it should be inside tabs. For me, I would like to create it as a screen in the root navigator, so that when I press, I no longer see the bottom navigation. And it's also going to be easier to do that. So let's go ahead and create a new screen in our root navigator by simply creating a new file in our app directory with the name of our route. For example, details, or details dot, or let's do stock.tsx. Here we need to simply export a component, and that is going to be our screen. I'm going to define it with a shorthand React Native functional component, but yeah, you can define a boilerplate here. Maybe the text and the view should be imported from source components themed, and here let's do stock details. That's going to be the name of our component. All right, so just like that, we define this component. Well, at this moment, we cannot navigate there easily on the mobile, but trust me, this screen is already there. I think I can show you that it's there if I open this project on web. With Expo Router, our project should work automatically on web as well. So by simply pressing W in our terminal, it will open here on the web. Let's wait for a bit for the bundle to load. And if I go back, what we see initially is our home screen with our stocks. It's zoomed in, that's why you see it so big. But at the same time, if I simply do if I simply navigate through using the browser URL to /stock, which is the name of our newly created route, we're gonna see a new screen with the text stock, and that's exactly what we have here. If I will do here hello world, that's what we're gonna see here, hello world, which means that automatically by creating a file here, Expo Router set up a route for it, so when we navigate there, it's already there. But how do we navigate there? And first of all, when do we want to navigate there? To do that, well, we want to navigate there when we press on one of these items. We want to navigate to the details. So let's open the components. Stock list item, which is the file that we just created. And I want, whenever I press on this whole container of that contains one stock list item, I want to navigate to the /stock screen. To do that, I'm going to use a link from Expo router, and I'm going to wrap my whole container, my whole view in this link. So let's do link. And the closing tag is going to go all the way till the end after the last view. Well, a link needs an href. It needs to know where do we want to navigate. Well, we want to navigate to /stock, and it also has suggestions as well. Don't worry about the lost styles yet, but simply let's press on one of these. If I do that, we are going to the stock page. So the navigation works by simply, and all we had to do is create a file, and then with a link doing / and the name of a file. Stock here, stock is the name of a file. When we do that, Expo router creates, configures, sets up that screen. It also configures the deep links for it, so everything is automatically handled for us, and we only have to actually build the screen. To fix the styles, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell the link to, instead of rendering any component on top of our container, I want to render the actual child as the main component. So by simply saying as child here, link will append like all the necessary props to the child component, and this way our styles are back are working as they were working before. But another problem arises in this situation, because if I press, nothing happens. And that's because whenever we do as child, link will pass to the child component the onPress event, because it needs to handle the onPress event. And in this situation, the view does not have a onPress event. Well, it's very easy to change it by simply importing from React Native a component called pressable. A pressable component is similar to a view. The only difference is that it can handle press events like onPress and so on. We don't need to send anything there, because the link is going to be the one who will send the onPress event to the pressable. We just need to replace the container from view to a pressable and make sure that the closing tag is also pressable. Now if I press on it, if I press on the link, it handles using the pressable, and we are navigated to the details page. Perfect. So now we saw how we can create screens, how we can navigate. And the next step is, how can we send data to this screen? Because we need to know on which exact stock did we press, on IBM, on Apple, or on Meta, right? At this moment, we cannot do that because we are not sending anything to this link. And here is where I'm going to introduce the dynamic path parameters. Dynamic path parameters, you might have saw them, for example, on Twitter. If you go to a profile on Twitter, you're going to see that the URL becomes twitter.com/ and the username /Vadim notjust.dev. This /Vadim notjust.dev, this is a dynamic path parameter. It's not a URL param or something like that. This is the actual URL that we are navigating to. With Expo router, to handle dynamic route parameters, all we have to do is we have to use a specific structure of a file name. So instead of naming our file stock, what I'm gonna name it, I'm gonna use the square brackets, and this defines a dynamic path parameter. Inside the square brackets, we need to give a name of that dynamic path parameter. So this is a name chosen by you. Sometimes it's ID. In my case, I want to navigate using the symbol. So it will make more sense if we have the dynamic path parameter called symbol, because this symbol we're going to get like inside the stock details. We will get access to to the value of our dynamic path parameter using the use local search parameters, which is a hook imported from Expo router. And here we're going to access the variable name, the same name that we have here for the dynamic path, which is symbol. Now if I'm gonna do hello world, double dots, and then symbol, and if I'm gonna press on one of these items, let's see where do we go. What's happening? Reload. If I press, we see hello world stock. And if I go somewhere else, it's still hello world stock. Why? Because if we go back to our stock list item, that's where we navigate, to the /stock. If I'm gonna navigate to the /hello, in that case, all of them will go to the /hello. So this part becomes that dynamic part path parameter that is being parsed and by a name called symbol, and we can access it on the screen using that use local search parameters, and it goes here in the symbol. In order to actually make it work, what we need to do is, instead of hard coding here like something like this, we need to actually send the symbol to which we want to navigate to. To do that, you can append the stock.symbol. And now if I'm going to press on IBM, we see hello world IBM. If I press on Apple, we see hello world Apple. So that's how we navigate and we use dynamic path parameters. And of course, in this situation, it would be better to use instead of plus sign, to use a template string using the backticks / and then providing here a dynamic part of a string called stock symbol. So now if I check, it works as it was working before, which means that everything is created correctly. So now we have our structure ready in terms of Expo router for our details page, and where we send like some data, like an ID or the symbol to the stock to which we want to navigate. Perfect. So now that we have the symbol here, we're going to be ready to go ahead and in the symbol, I don't know, maybe the first thing that we're gonna do is to take the stock. So const stock is equal to the stock data is going to also be somewhere in this top 5. Later on, what we want to do with this symbol is query our API and get information about our stock with that symbol. But for now, we are going to look through that top 5 and see which one of them we are trying to render to get all the data, not only the symbol. So I'm going to have to import top 5 from assets data top 5. And here I can access top 5, and I don't even need to find anything because the top 5 is an object that contains key value pairs where the key is the symbol. So by simply doing top 5 and access the symbol, we're going to get information about the stock. I can do here, for example, instead of hello world symbol, I can do hello world stock.name. So if I go to IBM, we see hello world, IBM, Apple, and so on. So that means that now we have access to more information about the stock by querying or by getting this information from somewhere. Later on, we're going to get it from the API. Now we're simply getting it from our top 5 dummy data. And of course, it's going to be smart to handle, like if we didn't find the stock with that name, we're going to return a text stock with symbol. Let's say symbol could not be found. So in this situation, in our mobile phone, like it's not gonna happen. It might happen if we, for example, send a deep link or open a deep link, but on the web, it can very easily happen, because if I will go to /ABC, in that situation, the stock with symbol ABC could not be found. If I go to /IBM, we're gonna see that it's still not found, because it should be IBM with capital, right? IBM. It's still not found. If I go back and press on IBM, but where I was navigating before? Yeah, let's do /IBM. Oh, okay, I think like my URL simply makes it lowercase when I do, even if I do uppercase. So it's not a big deal here, because later on, like, we're gonna query it from the API, and the API will be smart enough to handle lowercase and uppercase as well. Like, it's just locally, like a small issue. So just like that, we have our stock information, and what can we do with it? We can start by simply, instead of rendering this text, we can render the same stock, where is it? Stock list item from our components that we are rendering in the list. And that is going to give us already some information. Well, the thing is that we need to give here as the stock, just like that. And here we have it. We have at least some information to get started on the details page. This view, let's give it a style, and let's give it a padding 10 to have some spacing. And let's also, while we're here, adjust a little bit something about the header, because right now the header is kind of weird. As you remember, to adjust the header, all we have to do is use a stack imported from expo router dot screen, and here we can send options. For example, we can send the title, and the title, if it's stock details, is going to be updated at the top. The cool thing is that by doing it here, we have access to actual details of a stock. So we can do stock.name or stock.symbol. That's also possible. Meta platforms, alphabet, or maybe stock.symbol is going to make more sense. Apple. So now the title is a dynamic property coming from the data that we know about the stock. You can also adjust the back button titles. So if we do back, header back title, we can do back here, or maybe even we can do show header back title visible false, and this will completely hide the title and only leave the back button. Or, not sure if this is the best, we can also do header back title stocks. Or maybe I will hide it. I'll just leave the icon is enough. All right, so that's the initial details page. Later on, we can add like more information here, but for now, I think that's enough. So let's go ahead and do git add, git commit, and this was our stock details screen. Perfect. How's it going, guys? Following along, everything is clear so far? So what's going to be our next step? Our next step is going to be to render the charts, the chart for the time series. If we look into the dummy data that we imported, we also have like the time series, which is an array of basically date and values, like the high, the low, the closing, and so on. So using these values, we can plot them on a graph, on a chart. To do that, there are different charting libraries. To be honest, I'm not very happy with the status of most of the charting libraries. Some of them are very outdated. Some of them are not very supported. So the situation right now with charting, like in my opinion, is not the best. But the library that I'm using in my Famify application, the library that I'm using there is this one, React Native Graph, built by Mark from Margello. And even though the documentation is not the best, that is not very clear, the implementation is really nice because it's using the React Native Skia behind the scenes to plot these graphs, and we can also animate them, as you might see here in this chart. So yeah, it's really powerful, it's very fast, and it's much smoother than the React Native SVG graphs. So let's go ahead and use this one to plot the chart for the price history of our stock. Let's go ahead and start with the installation. This library depends on the React Native Reanimated because it also supports animating the graph. It depends on React Native Gesture Handler because it supports moving the finger on the graph to move like the, where is it? Yeah, like the dot. And also depends on the React Native Skia to render the graph. So let's go ahead and install all of these libraries in our project. I'm gonna install them using the npx install command. So if you look in the guide, I gathered all of the libraries here in one single command that we can simply copy from here, and opening the terminal, let's go ahead and do clear. I'm going to do npx expo install React Native Reanimated, Gesture Handler, React Native Skia, and the React Native Graph. Using npx expo install, we'll make sure that we are installing the libraries that are compatible with the current SDK version. So in my case, that's SDK 50. Let's go ahead in the documentation of Margello and let's open the React Native Reanimated, because there is a small step that we need to take for React Native Reanimated. From React Native Reanimated, let's open their documentations and let's click Get Started. And in the Quick Start guide here, we see that after we install Reanimated, we need to add as a second step the Babel plugin called React Native Reanimated /plugin. So let's go in our application, let's open our files, and let's go into the babel.config. And currently we do not have any plugins. So I will start by adding the plugins here, and here the React Native Reanimated plugin. If you have a plugin field, make sure to add the Reanimated as the last one. Now let's go back. And for Reanimated, that's everything we need. Later we're gonna see how it works. But yeah, basically it's only the dependency of a graph. Let's close the previous two tabs, go back, and do the same for Gesture Handler. For Gesture Handler, if we go into the documentation, view documentation, we should see in the installation guide here, we should see that after installing it, we also need to wrap our whole application in a Gesture Handler root view. So let's go ahead and do that in our source app underscore layout. The underscore layout is our, let's consider it as the entry point in our application, because this underscore layout that is directly in the app directory, this is the root layout, or the layout that is going to be wrapped around all the screens in our application. So that's where we usually set up global providers and things that we need to configure globally. So let's import here the gesture handler root view from React Native gesture handler root view. Oh boy, the import was too much, just like this. And let's go ahead and wrap our whole, if we scroll down into the root layout navigation, let's wrap our whole application in this gesture handler root view. Make sure to close it at the end, and also make sure to add here a style, which is going to have simply a flex one to make sure that this root view takes up the whole available screen space. Oh, why I'm taking the props? Yeah, that was my mistake. We need gesture handler root view, not root view props, just like this. Now if I'm gonna refresh, maybe something is not gonna work. So let's go ahead and stop the development server, because we need to restart, and make sure to also restart it with, oh, come on, npm start with that dash space dash clear. This will clear the macro bundler, and it's important for reanimated to take effect. Let's close this application. I'm gonna press I again to open it on iOS. And yeah, everything is working as it was working before, which is good to know, because we didn't introduce any errors installing these libraries. If that's the case for you, we are ready to go ahead and close everything and start rendering the graph from React Native graph. Here is where the documentation is lacking, because it doesn't provide a working example, but I'm gonna show you how we can do it. Let's initially prepare a bit our files and components, because even though we're going to render the graph on the detail screen of our stock, which is this symbol, I don't want to have everything into one file. I want to separate the logic of a graph into a separate component. So let's go ahead and create a new file under components folder called graph.tsx. I'm going to start with a simple component initially, from themed, and yeah, this is a bare bone component. And let's go into the application symbol, and after the stock list item, let's render the graph. It automatically imported it for me. For you, if it didn't, make sure to import it from components graph. As we can see, we already should see this graph text on our page. That means that our component is being rendered, so we can close everything and focus solely on this graph component to render the information. So let's start by importing the line chart from React. Where is it? React Native Graph. And probably it's not line chart, but line graph. Line graph. Let's go ahead and under the text graph, let's start by rendering the line graph. The line graph needs a couple of properties. One of them is the points that we want to render. Let's start with an empty array of points, like a blank empty line graph. Another one is going to be the animated, if we want it to be animated or not. I'm gonna start with a non-animated graph. This is going to render a more performant graph, but it's not going to have like animation and other advanced properties. So, and the last one is the color. Let's go with a red. So if I go here, is not a valid hex color. I think the color should be hexadecimal. What I can do is I can use colors dot the colors from our constants, dot light dot tint, and this is going to be our blue. At the moment, we're not gonna see anything, and even if we're gonna add any points here, we're still not gonna see anything, because if I add here a style to the graph, and if I will add a background color, I don't know, red, we do not see the graph at all. Because we need to size it, we need to specify some sizing properties. For example, width, I want it to be full width, so I'm gonna go with a 100%. Still not visible, but if I add here a height of 300 pixels, right away we see at least the background color red. So that means that now the line graph is being rendered, but we do not have any points. So I'm gonna start by removing the background color red once you are sure that it's being rendered. And let's go ahead and define the points. I'm gonna create a variable here, const points, that I'm gonna start with an empty array. Now let's simply send them to our line graph property points. The points has type any, but it expects to have a type of, and we can import from here graph point, the type graph point, and let's type it with graph point array. This is going to help us understand what information do we need in the points. You can hold Control and press on the graph point, and this is going to show you the type, the interface. And basically a graph point has two values, the value and the date of type date. So by simply going here and adding a couple of objects with date, new date, and value, for example 10, maybe another one with 15, and another one with 5, maybe something is gonna happen. Well, we need to provide like different dates, because right now all of them are the same date. So by doing 2024 1 here, 2024 1 2, and this one 2024 1 3, just like that, we actually have something on the screen and we have a graph. I hope you can also see it in your case. And yes, that's what it needs. The graph, the line graph, needs an array of points with date and value, date and value, date and value. Perfect. Instead of hard coding all of them, let's go ahead and use the time series that I have prepared for you. The time series coming from assets, data, and time series.json. This later is going to be fetched from the API, but now let's use the dummy data so that we can focus on rendering the graph and not thinking about like how to fetch data. So let's go ahead and import time series from at assets data time series.json, and the points, I'm going to comment them out, or maybe I'm gonna do, let's do here const graph points, I don't know, graph points, which is going to be having the same type. I want to create a new array called graph points based on the time series. So it's going to be equal to time series dot the time series is an object with some meta and values. We are interested in the values because this is our array of different values. Time series dot values, and the values is an array of this structure. Whenever we have to transform an array from a structure to a different structure, in this case we want from this data we want an array of this shape. Whenever we have to do that, we are dealing with a map or a dot map operator. So for every value, what I want to do is I want to create a new object that has, that has the date, for example, new date, and value 10, for example. I'm gonna start with value 10. Now let's go ahead and do a console log graph points to make sure that we are on the right path. If I'm gonna look in the terminal, and if I'm gonna go to the details page, it's not very easy to read. So what I will suggest you to do is to JSON.stringify our object, and if you pass here null and then 2, it's going to nicely structure them. So we see that it's an array with the structure that we need. So at least the structure is something that that we need. Well, for the date, we need to take the date time from our object, which is a string, and transform it to a date. So using the new date, we can pass here value dot date time, and it will transform it to a date. If I will look in the terminal, we see that yes, it's 19, 20, 21, and so on. Perfect. For the value, what I need to do is I will take the value.close, because that's the price, the closing price in that period. So value.close. We're gonna see that TypeScript is saying, hey, this is not a valid graph point array because the value should be a number, but we actually gave it a string. That's because the API gives us values as string. So what I'm gonna do is, again, I'm going to do number.parse float to transform from a string to a number. And just like that, if I look, the shape looks correct, the values look correct, the dates look correct. Let's go ahead and give the graph points to our line graph instead of points to graph points. And just like that, we should see a graph with something like this, with a shape like this. So that's good. That means that now I can delete the console log if you see a graph with this shape, and I can also delete the dummy points that we defined before, because we are basically mapping the time series, which is going to be the response from the API, and creating the array that we need in the graph. So I will also rename it from graph points to points. Let's go with points, because we only have one of them. Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. All right. So the graph is here. The graph is here, but there is a lot of ways we can improve this graph. For example, one of the ways we can improve it is by adding a background, and you can also add a background of a linear gradient background. So if we go here and provide here gradient fill colors, we can provide an array here from, I don't know, from that starts at the tint and goes all the way till, I don't know, 0, 0, 0 to black. Nothing is going to change because we need to switch from animated from false to true. And now we have a fill color for our graph that goes from our tint all the way till black at the bottom. Let me check how I did that in the previous project, because I was having like a bit better colors there. Where is it? Here in the components chart. Oh, I had these colors. Let me try them. Let me try color. Okay. Let me try. I will remove a color tint, the gradient fill color, and the animated. All right, so now it's like a greenish color, and the background as well. It's not like fully green at the top, but it has like some transparency, which adds this little nice effect over our graph, and it also goes to a darkish color. Let's see how it will look on the white. I think on the white it's also looking good. Oh, come on. Z. Yep, perfect. Nice. Love this. Well, again, there is other ways we can adjust it as well. For example, we can enable punch gesture. So if we do enable punch gesture, we are going to be able to press and move around the graph like this. That's cool. And what can we do with that? We can display the price at that current time, right? Because there is the on gesture start, on point select, fired. For each point the user pans through. You can use this event to update labels or highlight selections in the graph. So let's go on point selected. What I want to do here is, let's define a function at the top, const on point selected. And what it will give us, I don't know. Let's see, line graph. Line graph props, there was animated, and the one point selected will receive a point that was selected. So here it will receive point, and we can do console log point dot value or point dot date. So if we look into the terminal, and as I move through them, we see different points being selected. So what I can do with this is I can save this in a state variable, and I can display it on the UI. For example, above a line graph, we can have a text that will render the value, I don't know, 123.5, and below that it's going to render the date. For example, new date dot to isostring. This text, let's style it a bit. Font size, font size 20. Let's go there. Font weight bold. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch from a text to a mono text imported from style text component. Style text. Make sure to the closing tag is also mono there. Where? Mono text. Yep. Font bold. Does it change anything? Font bold? No, it doesn't. But that's okay. I can do a color green. Okay, so now we are rendering some text here. Maybe for this one, I'm gonna do style. Let's not even display the date. I'm only going to display the value, right? So what I can do here is I can store the currently selected dot in a state. So selected point, set selected point. I'm going to use a state value of type graph point so that I can do the following. When we pass through the value here, let's go ahead and do set selected point. And here I'm going to render point or selected point dot value. Selected point dot value. And maybe I will also do dot to fixed one to only display like dot to or something like that. At the above, I don't need the text graph, so to make it looking a bit better, should I do the same color for the text as I have for this graph? Yeah, that's nice. So as you can see, I can press, hold, and then as I swipe, I see how the price moved. Here it goes to 194, at the bottom 185, and at the top 196 again. So perfect. And the same way, you can add another text for the date as well. I didn't do that just because, yeah, just because I'm a bit lazy, because with the selected point dot date dot to date string, it's gonna, oh, to date string works nice. And I can do here style color gray. Yes, now it looks nice. Another thing, but these are already like very small improvements, because as we go, for example, I look at the top one here, and if I release it, it goes to the end. So what I can do is here, if on end, on gesture end, I can reset the selected point, set selected point, with the last point in our points array. So points, maybe at position 0, that's going to be the first one. So if I move this one like this, and then I move, yeah, I don't like this one. I will leave it as it was, because it updates too often. So, all right. The only thing that I will probably improve is initially the default value is going to be points at position points dot length -1, and this is going to take the last point and set it to the currently selected one. So if I go to Apple here, we see 196, and this is actually the last point in the graph. If I press and hold to move, that's going to be the last point in the graph, which makes sense. Okay, nice, nicely done. Looks nice. For now, I think with a graph, I'm gonna leave it here. And maybe at the end, we can look into other things as well, because we, as we will have like more data, we're gonna be able to play more with this graph, like switching from different time frames, like similar to how you have on Yahoo Finances, where you can switch from 1 day to 5 days to 1 month, and our graph will automatically resize and animate to the new values. But this is going to be done when we will have more data. Now our basic graph is here. We can move through it. It looks really nice. There is one very small thing. Where is it? Selection dot. Selection dot. You can add a custom selection dot, or I think there is a property indicator pulsating. So if you do that, will it? No. How did I do it? Let me check in my source code of a Femify project, because there I'm using the same graph and it pulsates really nicely. If I go to the application, features, savings, components, graph, bottom, top, enable indicator and indicator pulsating, enable fade in mask. Let's try these 3 properties. Enable indicator, yes. But if we have an indicator, yes, it pulsates there. Maybe we can add some padding 10 so that we can see. Yeah, right now, like, yeah, it's not very beautiful because at the end, like, it's cut, but it's really nice that it's pulsating there. So if I will simply change some in the time series for the last point, the close, if it's gonna be 90, now it's gonna look better. So we see that the indicator is pulsating and we can press on it and move around. All right. So let's go ahead and commit the changes, because that's our basic graph that we have created here. So git add, git commit graph using React Native graph. Perfect. Good progress so far. How are you guys doing? Using Alpaca. Hi, can you please make one video on screenshot and screen protector application? What kind of screen protector application? Not sure if I'm familiar with such kind of applications. Okay, so we are at a point almost halfway through our tutorial, and so far we have implemented the home screen where we have a list of stocks, and when we go in the details page we see more information about the stock and the chart with the time series here. So far this is everything, only UI. We have implemented only the UI using dummy data, and in the next step, in the next part of the tutorial, we are supposed to actually fetch the data, the real data of the stocks, so that our application is usable, is functional, not only with dummy data but with actual real data. For that, we're going to use the data from TwelveData, which is going to provide us financial data. They have a REST API, quite good documentation, and why I chose them for this tutorial is because they have a free plan that includes around 800 API credits per day. So that's going to be more than enough for us to get started. So go ahead and sign in, create an account. It's pretty straightforward. You just provide a couple of things there, and then you're going to receive a confirmation email. After you have done that, we're going to need the API key that you will see here. So yeah, after you have it, take it, and we are going to be ready to go. Let's go ahead and open TwelveData. Where is it? The TwelveData. The TwelveData. Come on. TwelveData.com. I will go to the developers, and let's go ahead to the documentation. Where is documentation? Products. Documentation. Need API documentation. So it should be TwelveData.com/docs. Here is the documentation for the API. The authentication works using the API key that we have created, that we have got by creating an account. And the endpoints that we're going to use in today's tutorial are the following ones. In the core data, there is this code endpoint, and let's simply press on this code endpoint. As we can see, the code endpoint gives us information about one stock, information such as symbol, name, and so on. If we have a look into the dummy data of top 5, that's exactly what data we need here for the top 5 or for the home screen. Another thing to know is the code is only giving information about one stock. If, however, we look into the getting started, into the batch requests, we see that we can send batch requests by simply, for example, under a symbol, adding multiple symbol split by comma. So this works in a lot of with a lot of requests. So to get the code information of multiple symbols, what we're gonna do is in the URL where you see symbol Apple, just add comma, and here let's do IBM. And if you press enter, we see that the demo API key is only used okay. That means that the API key, currently the API key here is the demo one. So by simply going to our dashboard, taking the API key, come on, and replacing in the URL from demo to our actual API key, we should see a request with two answers: information about the Apple stock and information about the IBM stock. So with this URL, that's going to be the core of our top 5 or of our home screen to render the top 5 or the list of pre-selected stocks. We could go ahead and integrate directly with the REST API by sending a GET request to API TwelveData, and that is going to work fine. However, in a lot of applications that I'm building, whenever possible, I'm trying to use GraphQL. Why? Simply put, is that from the front end, from the client side, we have more flexibility and more control over what data we are requesting. With a REST API, whenever we will send a request, for example, to TwelveData, we're going to receive all this information. In some cases, we don't actually need all of this information. For example, on the home screen, we only need name, symbol, and the price. So instead of only querying free fields, we are querying a lot of data. That, on one hand, leads to more data being transferred from a network and the application being slower. And on another end, here we're talking about connecting multiple endpoints and the data in a way that we actually need it on the front end. For example, in our application, as the next step, we're going to add a feature of adding favorites. The favorites, we're going to store them in a custom database, in a Postgres database. With a REST API, the process of querying the data and displaying like your favorite stocks is going to include one, sending a request to the API to get all the favorites, favorite symbols, and then for every single favorite symbol, sending a request to this TwelveData API to get information about it. So that leads to the N+1 issue with REST APIs, where whenever we have to render a list of things, in a lot of cases, we have to send one request for the list and N request for every single item to get more details. That's because from the front end, we cannot control what fields do we need. With GraphQL, these issues are solved, and that's why I really like using GraphQL, especially when I'm working on the client side. And StepZen, IBM StepZen, the sponsor of today's video, is building these GraphQL APIs very, very easily. We don't have to think about optimization on how to host it and so on. With IBM StepZen, we can simply run a command and we have our API created. Instead of me telling you that, let me actually open stepzen.com and let's get started. Let's go ahead and open the documentation, the getting started. Make sure to create an account on StepZen. We're gonna need that. That's going to be the first step. Go ahead, sign up. It's free to sign up. You don't need any keys. After you have signed up, developers, I want to go to the docs. Let's go to the overview, maybe to the install and setup. After we have created an account, let's go ahead and install the IBM StepZen CLI tool. This is going to help us initialize and manage our GraphQL API. So in our terminal, let's go ahead and clear everything. And let's start by installing the IBM StepZen CLI globally on our machine. After that is done, let's go ahead and do StepZen login here. With a StepZen login, we need to provide the account name. You will get it from the StepZen dashboard. If you open it up in the account, go ahead on this key and you're gonna see the account name here. So provide the account name in your terminal and the admin key. The admin key is going to be the second one. I already have signed up, but after you do that, you can go ahead and run StepZen who am I? And if you have signed up, you're gonna see your account here. That means that you have authenticated correctly with StepZen. Now, the next step is going to be the following. We're gonna create our API using StepZen, and for that, we're going to create a new folder where we will keep the configuration file of our API. Let's call this folder API. We're gonna do that in our Expo project, but it's like separate, independent. So just for simplicity, we're putting it into the same folder, but it doesn't have to be there. You can create it as a separate project as well. So from our terminal, let's navigate to that folder using cd API. Now that we are here, and the next step for us is going to be to create our API, or in another way is going to put it in another words, we will simply transform a REST API to a GraphQL API. To do that, the first step is going to be to have this URL that is working here for us, and make sure to also have it with multiple, or let's not do it with multiple. Let's change it back to only one symbol. We're going to start importing this query first, and after that we're going to think about a list of symbols as well. So let's make sure that everyone is on the same page. Let's go to the TwelveData, and let's go to the core data and here code. Let's simply press on the code here and copy the URL from the top. The URL from the top is the URL that we want to parse and transform to a GraphQL. To do that with StepZen, you're going to be impressed how easy it is. All we have to do is write StepZen import StepZen import, and then the URL that we just copied. Let's press save. Of course, I forgot that we need StepZen import REST. Is it StepZen import REST? Oh no, it's curl. Yes, Vadim, come on. StepZen import and curl. Now let's paste the URL that we just copied and press enter. The first question is going to be, how do we want to call the endpoint? I'm going to press simply enter and go with that one. And we see that GraphQL successfully imported the schema that was generated there. I'm going to show you in a moment what actually happened there, but let's go ahead and do StepZen start to start our StepZen API. What's happening here, StepZen is going to deploy the imported schema to StepZen Cloud, and at the end we are going to see this graphical URL that we can press and open in our browser, and through this URL, through the dashboard, we're going to be able to interact directly with our API. So if I'm going to go to variables, I see here that we need to provide API key. So let's copy the API key from TwelveData back to here. We need this source, which actually we don't need, so let's just do docs, and we need the symbol that we want to query, for example, AAPL for Apple. If I'm gonna press run now, what we should see is we should see the information about Apple. The good thing is that now this is a GraphQL API, and I can only leave the things that we need, for example, symbol and name, if that's what our user interface needs. So if I send now the request, we see symbol Apple, name Apple Inc. If I will also add the close here, we're gonna see another field. So just like that, from a REST API, we created a GraphQL API that we can integrate, and we also deployed it to StepZen. Now, yeah, this is a deployed endpoint that we can call from anywhere. We don't have even to think about like hosting it somewhere, and StepZen is scaling really well with the demand of your application. This was just the beginning. Let's have a look at what happened during this process. So the first step that we have done is StepZen import curl. By running this command, StepZen sent a request to this URL that we provided to him. If we send manually a request there, if we send there a manual request, the response is going to be this one. StepZen received this response, it parsed it, it understood what is the structure of the data that it's receiving back. It also understood what parameters this URL needs, and it created the GraphQL schema for us automatically. To have a look at that schema, let's go into the API folder in the curl folder, and here there is the index GraphQL. if we scroll down a bit, we see that there is a query that is sending a REST API request to this endpoint, to the endpoint API 12data.com/code. It also added the API key, the source, and the symbol as string parameters because they were parameters in our URL, and it will automatically append them to the end of the URL. And the result is this root result that we can safely rename to something that makes more sense for us. For example, in our case, this can be a symbol, right? Or a code, symbol code, or a code, because we are sending like /code. Yeah, maybe this is going to be code. So if we rename it to code here, we should rename it to code here as well. Now, my query can be renamed to code to make more sense when we are interacting with our GraphQL API. The source, I don't think we actually need this source, so I will remove it from here. And just by doing that, if we open the terminal where we run StepZen start, we see that StepZen is watching our files, our schema, and every time we change it, it's redeploying it back to StepZen. If you don't see any errors here, we can safely go back to StepZen dashboard, and here we can press refresh, and we're gonna see that now our query is different. Our query is a code query, which makes more sense, and it has only the API key and the symbol that we need to send. Well, I don't really want to send the API key. I want this API key to be somehow pre-configured for me, because as a user of my API, I don't want to handle the API key from TwelveData. I want my GraphQL API to handle it. So what I can do is either I can manually add it here at the end with question mark, API key, then the actual value like ABC. But a better way would be to use a config file. To use a config file, I'm going to go back to the StepZen documentation in the setup. Let's see, maybe not in the setup, but transform REST to GraphQL. So let's go ahead and look at this config file. So to configure headers, let's go ahead and create a config YAML file and add this structure as the configuration. In the API folder, let's manually create a config.yaml file. And here let's paste the configuration structure that we saw there. For the name, we can give here the name, I don't know, 12data, something like that. And here we are providing different configuration headers. For example, in this case, we are providing an authorization token. I will point back to the documentation of TwelveData in the getting started. Under authentication, we see that there are two ways we can authenticate the requests. Either with a query string by appending API key with your key, or using a header authorization that has the following structure: API key, your API key. So that means that instead of bearer here, we need API key, this one, API key, and then our API key that we can take from the dashboard. So I can put it here. So now we have a configuration called TwelveData that adds a header authorization with our API key. The last step is to go back in our GraphQL schema and assign this configuration set to our REST endpoint here by adding here after the endpoint the configuration. I think configuration. Let's double check the documentation. It's in the REST we have configuration and the name of a configuration. So the name of our config was 12data. 12data. Now we can safely remove the variable API key, because now the API key is managed through a header that is in our configuration. Let's check the terminal, and we see that we have an error. If that's happening, that means that we have some issues. Configuration. Oh, it should be a string, right? Yes. Now deploying, and after it's finished, we see done in 3.5 seconds. That means that I can go back to the dashboard. I can press refresh, and now my request doesn't need an API key. It only needs the symbol. So it's much easier to consume this GraphQL API because I only need to provide the symbol, run it, and I get information about the symbol. So as we can see, if everything is still working, if you see the information, that means that all our configuration that we have created there is still working correctly. It's adding the authorization. So yeah, everything is fine. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to be back, and the next step is going to be to create the codes endpoint, because at the moment this one only returns us one information about one symbol, name and symbol. Because if we're gonna try to, for example, provide here a batch symbol list like Apple and then Google, in that situation, we're going to see name null and symbol null. So we're going to have to change a little bit our API to make sure that we can not only request one code for one stock, but also a batch request for multiple stocks as well. So that's going to be the next step. I'm going to come back in a second. All right, so I'm back. Are you still here? So let's see. Is it clear so far? Do you have any questions? Am I going too fast? Let me know in the comments, guys. Enrique is saying, I started building applications thanks to your tutorials. Oh, that's so nice. Now, 2 years later, I'm working on a massive project for one of the biggest distributor companies. I have no words to express my gratitude. Oh my God, I'm so happy to read these kind of messages. I really appreciate that, Enrique. And good luck to you with your projects. What application are you building there? Kumar, yeah, I will check into that. To be honest, I don't know how that is happening, but I can have a look. Should be string. Yes, thank you very much. We fixed that. Anyway, let's continue. We still have a lot of things to do. And yes, our first GraphQL endpoint that is returning us information about one stock, like the code of one stock, is working. Let's go ahead and adjust it, or maybe add another request that is going to return us information about multiple codes. First of all, let's see how that works on the API. And on the API, by simply adding, when we query the symbol, if we add comma and another one, for example, Microsoft, the demo API key is not working in this situation, so we need the actual API key. We are able to request from one single request to TwelveData. We are able to request information about multiple stocks. It's a batch request. All right, so that means that the endpoint is actually the same. It's /code. The only difference is that the symbol is different. And pay attention at the structure of a response, because when we send a request only to one query, it's an object with the values directly. If we send a batch request, it's an object where we have key value pairs for all the symbols that we sent there. So the response structure is a little bit different than what we have previously. To create a GraphQL query in StepZen, we created the first one by running StepZen import. That's not the only way to do that. That's the easiest way to do it. But if you know a little bit of GraphQL, you can write these queries right away in your GraphQL, and by knowing like the directives that StepZen is supporting, like you can build them yourself. I know GraphQL, but I think by having an example, it's not that complicated to adjust things. For example, if we need another query, let's start by simply duplicating the one that we already have. I'll go ahead, I will duplicate it here, and the name of this query is going to be codes. Let's be safe and just see if the StepZen is deploying. Let's go ahead in our dashboard, and if I refresh, and if I go into open the builder, now we see that we have code, and we also have codes codes query. Sorry, my brain stopped working for a second. So it still works. Apple, maybe average volume is not there, but symbol. Let's see. Yes, it still works. The thing is that we want this codes API to work with batch request when we have not only one symbol, but we have, for example, Apple, and then IBM, and then Microsoft, for example. If now I send this request to the codes, we see that the return type is different. It's trying to have the same return type, and it's actually null, because the symbol and the name, when querying it like this, is actually null. What we are gonna do is the response that we receive here, we're gonna transform it a bit in order to make it work the way we want it to work. If we go into the documentation of StepZen, and if we are looking at, for example, search, transform, and scroll down to the StepZen directive reference, and here is the REST API, the REST directive, and the REST directive has a way to add transforms. Transforms are a way to get the response that we get from the REST API, and before transforming it, before returning it as a GraphQL schema. If we scroll down a bit, I found a very useful predefined transform that we actually need in this situation, and it's called object to array. Let me zoom in a bit. So the object to array is exactly like for what we're doing here. Many backends return a list of key value pairs with field names representing the key as opposed to an array. So that's what we have. We have a key value pair instead of an array. What we want to do is transform from an object with key value pairs to an array. To do that, we are going to use a transform. So let's copy it from here. Transforms. I'm gonna copy from documentation, and I'm gonna add this transformation to our code API. The transformation is going to work directly on the response without having to look into the data. So I'm gonna remove the data from here, and I'm gonna only have like here, which basically means for every object that we get for every key value pair, transform it to an array. The array that is going to be transformed to, so this will produce the following array. Name, which is going to be the key of our response, for example, Apple, and the value, which is going to be the code of that symbol. So remember, we get back an array of objects where we have name and value fields. That means that the response is not going to be code, it's going to be codes. Or, yeah, let's call it codes. Or no, let's do... it's going to be the response is going to be an array of codes, right? And a code, basically the array, as I said, is going to have name and value. Let's define a type called codes, and this type will have name and value. The name is going to be of type string, but the value of our object, if we look into the request, the value is going to be this object. This is actually information about the symbol. So the value is going to be exactly the same as here. So the value is going to be code. So let's refresh what we have here. We are sending the same request here, but this is going to be a batch request. The answer for the batch request is a bit different than a normal request. For that reason, we have to apply a transform that will transform an object to an array. The object to array transform will get the object where we have key value pairs and will transform it to an array where we have name and value. This way, this is going to be the response. It's going to be an array of codes where one code has a name, which is the symbol, and the value, which is the actual details. So with this, let's check if our API has been deployed. Yes, it has. Now we can go to the dashboard of StepZen and we can refresh. Now if we look, you can look into the documentation of your API. You can check the query. You see that you have API codes and it returns codes and so on. Let's go ahead with the builder. I'm going to remove everything from here. And from the builder, let's open codes. Let's go with a symbol, for example, AAPL and Microsoft. And maybe even IBM. And as a result, let's take the name and also information about the value, like name, symbol, open, and so on. If I send this request, that's what we have. It works exactly how we wanted. The codes is an array, and the array contains information about every symbol that we have requested with the value of it. In fact, the name from this object to value, we don't need it because it's going to be the same as the symbol here. So IBM. So we can leave it out and only take the values. The value. And I think we can also apply another transform to make sure that we are unwrapping this value right away here, not to have to go to codes.value.something. Not sure if I want to continue because even right now everything is gonna work. But for example, transform. No, I'm gonna leave it like this. Whew, that's our second API endpoint. So now we have two GraphQL queries. One to get a code, which is information about one symbol, and the second one is to get a list of codes. Okay. Let's go ahead and commit these changes. So I'm going to open a new terminal. Make sure you're in the root of your folder, of your project. So let's do git add, git commit, -m, set up StepZen API and add to queries, quote, and codes. Before we start querying this API in our application, I want to include, I want to add another query in our GraphQL and in our GraphQL API that will give us the time series of one stock. This query is going to be needed for our graph, and let's go ahead and see how we can do that. First of all, let's look at the API documentation for TwelveData. I'm gonna close some of the stuff that I don't need. Yes, let's go here. And in the core data, there is an API endpoint for time series. This API call returns meta and time series for requested instrument. And the time series is an array of objects ordered by time descending with open, high, low, close, and so on. Okay, so let's press on this URL to see what's going on here. If we press, we see an example of a request to time series for Apple here. In the request here, we see the symbol Apple, we see also the interval for what we want, and the API key demo and the source docs. Let's copy this URL, and what we have to do is we have to go ahead and import this endpoint, which is a REST API endpoint, in our StepZen. To do that, we're going to open the terminal. We're going to go there where we have our API running, or maybe I'm going to leave it running. So in another terminal, I'm going to do cd API. Make sure that you are in the API directory of your project. And let's go ahead and do StepZen import curl and paste the URL. That was not what I wanted to do. I need to copy the URL from time series, and let's do StepZen import curl and paste the URL. StepZen is going to go ahead, do a request, analyze the response, and create another folder inside our API directory called curl 0.1. What you can do is you can rename them. For example, but I'm going to do that in a moment. Let's just see in the index GraphQL what we see here. In the index GraphQL, we see a query called myQuery. Let's test it out first. So let's check StepZen is still running. If not, run StepZen start. And let's go to our dashboard and let's refresh. From the builder, I'm going to remove a query and I'm going to open the builder. We see that now we have a new query called myQuery. If I open it up, I need to provide the API key of TwelveData. So let's do that. I just want to test it. Later, we're going to improve it. I need to provide the interval, and the interval can be 1 min, which is 1 minute. The source, I think it doesn't need to be there, but let's do docs here. And the symbol, I'm going to do AAPL. Let's select from the meta the symbol type. Let's select everything. I don't need everything. the status and the values. In the values, I'm going to choose all. If I press run, we see that we are sending a request to Apple for 1 minute intervals. The status is okay, and we get an array of values. This is going to be exactly what we're going to need to feed our graph and to display this time series in the graph. Perfect. I love that. Let's go back in our API and improve a little bit the query and so on. For example, I'm going to rename it from my query to time. How to do it? Time. Let's do time underscore series. The API key, or let's do the API key. I'm going to remove it from here. And instead of that, I'm going to add it inside the REST directive. So after the endpoint, I'm going to add it through a configuration file. So configuration is going to be a string called 12data, because that's how we called it here in the config YAML, 12data. And this configuration simply adds our API key header. 12data. I hope I called it correctly, 12. The symbol we need, but the source we don't, so I'm gonna remove that. The interval, I'm gonna leave it because I want to be able from our front end to send different intervals to see the chart for basically different intervals. Symbol is important. The answer, I don't want it to be called root, I want it to be time series. So let's find the root and call it time series. This is meta, this is status, this is values entry. Values entry, maybe you can do here time, but it's okay. Values entry, I think, makes sense. You can leave them like this in different files. I think I will leave them like this in different files. The only thing is that I'll change here the name from curl01 to time underscore series. And if you change the folder name, go ahead and open index GraphQL, because this index GraphQL from the root of your API is where we merge everything together. So make sure to change the name of a folder here as well to time underscore series. And you can change the first folder name from curl to code. And if we change the file name in index as well from curl to code. Now with that being said, let's check if StepZen is being deployed. Yes, it is. I can go here. I can refresh. And in the codes, I'll delete this codes URL. I see a new query called time series. I can send here the interval 1 minute for IBM. And we can check the values of the close, and that's it, because that's only and the date time, of course. And if I send this request, that's the data, exactly the data that we need for our graph, and not more, not less. And that's the power of GraphQL, because instead of receiving all of this data, we are getting only the values that we need for the graph. Perfect. So now that we have our time series as well, I think we on the GraphQL API we have all the on the backend on the GraphQL API we have all the queries ready that we need to integrate our existing UI with. So on the first screen, what we're gonna do is we are going to send a request to our codes by sending multiple symbols, and we're gonna receive back an array of codes. On the detail screen, at the top, we're gonna send a request to a code to get information about only one symbol. And on the for the graph, we're gonna send a request to the time series to get information to know what do we need to plot on the graph. So that's gonna be the next step. But before we do that, let's go ahead and do a clear, do a git add and a git commit time series GraphQL endpoint or query. Perfect. So before we move on, let me know if you have any questions so far. Code Novators, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Take a look at Expo screen capture. Should be able to handle many cases. That's a recommendation to managing like screen recording and screenshots. Give me just 1 second. I think I need the second cup of coffee. And our next step is going to be integrating our GraphQL API inside our React Native application, querying the data that we need, and displaying like real data throughout the application instead of dummy data. But for that, we need some coffee, and we are going to continue. Give me just 1 second. Okay, so we are back. Let's go ahead and continue our tutorial. And our next step, as I was saying, is going to be querying our GraphQL API inside React Native. There are multiple ways you can do that. There are multiple libraries that can help you with that. The library that we are going to use for this tutorial is Apollo Client. In previous tutorials, we've also used React Query. Why my keyboard is not working? Oh, it's working. So API, we created the code, we created the config file, imported, object to array, perfect. So yes, we're gonna use Apollo GraphQL client to fetch a GraphQL API from React, and in this case, React Native as well, from a React Native application. And Apollo doesn't only handle like fetching, but it also handles caching on the device as well. So the data that we receive is cached and it's normalized, something that we don't get with other solutions. And I think it's, as I was saying, like in previous tutorials, I was trying React Query. I know a lot of people are using React Query, and it's great, especially like when you're working with REST APIs. For GraphQL APIs, I found Apollo Client to be easier to integrate with, and moreover, Apollo Client also normalizes the cache, which means that it's more performant, and when you're sending requests from different parts of your application, they are stored basically. If you are requesting the same information about an object from different parts of your application, it's going to be stored all in the same place. So let's go ahead and actually get started with Apollo Client. we're gonna first install Apollo client, and then we're gonna do our first queries. So go here, let's go to the client React, and the React client is going to work with React Native as well. I'm using version 3, and let's go ahead and check the get started. So the step 1 is going to be to install the dependencies. Let's copy this. There are only 2 dependencies, the Apollo client itself and GraphQL. And the GraphQL library is here to help us parse the GraphQL queries. After we have done that, we're going to have to initialize Apollo client. For that, I usually create a new folder called Apollo, where we keep information about Apollo. And here, let's create a new file called client.ts. In this client.ts, we need to initialize the Apollo client. For that, let's import Apollo client and the in-memory cache. And let's see in the next step how we can initialize the client. I'm going to copy it from the documentation. To initialize the client, all we need is the URI to our GraphQL and the cache. The URI to our GraphQL should be our StepZen GraphQL endpoint. If we, for example, stop our StepZen and then do StepZen start, the StepZen start will show us our API endpoint. So here deploying, and we see that this is our API endpoint. You can copy it, and we can put it here. The cache is something like where should Apollo manage the cache. So we are using the in-memory cache. Another step is going to be to authorize with StepZen, because when we have to send a request to our StepZen API, not everyone will be able to do that. Only the ones that knows the API key. So here in an example, we see that to send a request, we need to add a header called authorization, where we have API key and where we will put our public API key for StepZen. With Apollo client, we can manage this globally by adding here headers, and the value is going to be, as you can see, authorization. So you can even copy paste this field to the value here, to the key, and the value is going to be API key space and the actual API key. So API key space and now the actual API key. The actual API key you can get by simply running in another command. You can run stepzen who am I -- API key, and this is going to be your public API key for StepZen. Copy it and paste it right away here. If you know how to work with environment variables in Expo, go ahead and add it as an environment variable. I'm gonna leave it for here for now. Now the last step is to go ahead and export default client, because we are going to need this client in the Apollo client provider, where we will expose it to the other components in our application. To do that, we need to wrap our application with Apollo client provider, and that is going to allow us to run queries from any part of our application. Remember, as I was saying, we are using the global providers inside our app directory _layout. This is the root layout where we are doing the global providers. So here, what we need is we need 2 things. We need to import the Apollo client provider from Apollo client. Is it? Yes. And also we need to import the client that we just created and we just set up. So by having the Apollo client provider and the client, we can go ahead and wrap it around our application. I don't think it should be above gesture handler, so I'm going to put it below gesture handler as Apollo client provider, and here let's send the client equal client. Make sure that In my case, this is a very common error. Like if it's a self-closing tag, that means that our stack or other things will not have access to this client provider. So make sure to remove this self-closing and close it at the end, because the way a provider works is the children, everything inside it, will have access to this client. So that's exactly what we need. So if I do a reload, Apollo client provider, did I mess up the name? Connect your client to React. Apollo client, Apollo provider. Oh, it should be Apollo provider. Okay, it should be Apollo provider. Apollo provider. Here. Just messed up the name. Let's rename it, and also the closing tag as well. Now everything is working, which is fine. We don't have any errors, which means that we have initialized our client correctly. Let's go ahead and try to send our first query. The process to send a query is the following. Go ahead on your StepZen dashboard and build your query here and test it out and make sure that it works the way you want it. So I'm going to start by removing everything, and let's start by sending the query on the home screen. That will get a list of tickers or a list of symbols. That is going to be our codes request. The symbol, instead of hard coding it here, let's add it as a variable at not a $ symbol here, which should be a string. Now this $ symbol, we're sending it to our codes query. And I'm going to open up here and I'm going to say that I need from the value, I need the name, I need the symbol, I need the percentage change, and I need the close. Basically, the information and the data we need on this screen. So let's try by adding here variables. Make sure to add the symbol here with multiple values. Let's try to send this request. If everything works and if the data structure is the way you want it, that means that our query is complete, and we can go ahead and copy it, and we're gonna use it in our application. Let's go ahead on the screen where we need to run this query, and that is going to be app tabs index. This is where we have our top 5 stocks that currently are coming from the dummy data. Now, to do a query, we need 2 things here. A hook called useQuery and the useQuery. Come on, useQuery from Apollo client. And also we need the GraphQL or GQL tag that will allow us to define here the query string. So the query string we're gonna build with GQL. Here we're gonna add, we're gonna follow it with the backticks, and inside this backtick string, we're gonna put the query that we copied from the StepZen dashboard. So now this is a GraphQL query stored in a variable called query that we can run using we can run in our screen using the useQuery hook like this. If we do that, something is happening, but without receiving the result, we're not gonna get a lot of benefit. A useQuery gives us back an object, and the 3 fields that I usually destructure from here are loading, or let's start with data, loading, and error. Apollo client is handling for us the loading and error states. So if it's still loading, the loading is going to be true, and we can check here. If loading, I can return an activity indicator, right? If there is an error, I can return a text saying failed to fetch, how is it called, fetch stocks. Otherwise, if it's not loading and if it's not error, then there should be some data. So let's start by console logging data. If I have a look in the console log here, and if I reload our application, we should see already an object here. An object with a value code, and inside it we see an array of actual code. So the data will have a field called codes because that's how we named our query, codes. So if I do data.quotes, and if I will put it into a JSON.stringify with two additional parameters, null and two, I'm gonna see more information about this code. It has a type name and it has a value. So from this array of objects, I actually need only an array of these things, right? Because that's what we need for the flat list. An array of information, of symbols and so on, which is still null, which we're gonna cover in a second. But because I started, let's do the following. So as I say, I don't need an array of objects that have a value. I need an array of values themselves. So what I'm gonna do is data.codes. I'm gonna do it the following: data.codes.map, and for every code, I want to take only the code.value. Value. Now if I save, we see that the array that we console log is actually an array of actual values about symbols. So what I can do is, instead of console logging it, I will store it into stocks equal this, and the stocks that I am taking from dummy data, I'm gonna remove altogether. All right, so we have something. I don't know what's happening here, but we have. The problem is that if we look into the logs, we see that name, symbol, and so on is null. Why? Because we forgot to send the symbols, the symbols variable that we want to query. To send a variable to a query, in the use query, we need to pass the second object here with variables, where variables is going to be an object that will contain the symbol that we need there. And the symbol will be, for example, AAPL, IBM, Microsoft, General Electric, General Motors, Netflix, and so on. Not sure still what's happening. A lot of data. It keeps querying. Oh, because it's JSON stringified. Oh, whoa, chill. I just need the mapping, not the JSON stringified. Value. But I would be able to use this console log JSON stringify stocks. To see what's going on there. Is it still null? Yeah, it's still null. If I do a request from here, variables, symbol, Let's try these variables, right, that we have here, because from the dashboard it works, from here it doesn't, which is a bit weird. And again, it doesn't. Maybe, to be honest, maybe my API is getting, my API key is getting capped, but it doesn't seem like it. Variables. I'm gonna open, you know what? I'm gonna open the J to see the inspector and to see directly the network request that we are doing. So here, why I cannot zoom in? Does anyone know how to zoom in here? Because I cannot. So if I refresh, oh, now it works. And the Microsoft, I think, was a bit different. So let's go ahead and take some tickers for our home screen. We have IBM. We have Meta. What else? We have NVIDIA. Tesla. AMD. Tesla. AMD. Okay. Here, just a little insight. I'm hard coding like the tickers that I want to request for my home screen, which I'm getting rate limited because I'm doing that too often. But in a lot of applications, what you'd like to show on like the home screen is maybe the market movers, which are the list of stocks that people should keep an eye on. The problem is that these are only available on the Pro plan, which I don't have yet. So that's why I'm hard coding like a list of popular stocks that I want to see on the home screen. So what's happening here and why? Yes, after reloading, we see a list of stocks that I have predefined there, and they have actually the correct value, the price, and also the percentage change. Amazing. So we just saw how we can install Apollo client, how we can create a client, how we can create Apollo client that would connect with our GraphQL endpoint. We added the authorization header, and we made sure to provide it in the root layout using the Apollo provider. Now, because we have provided it all our screens in our application, including our home screen, the stock screen, they can run queries and mutations using the cook use query. To do that, we first need to define the query object with the fields, with the query that we want to run and the fields that we want to return. And using the use query hook, we can execute that query. It sends the request to our GraphQL endpoint. It receives it, it stores it, normalized, it caches it, and it handles like all the loading error states for us. And after that, we just take the data and render it in our flat list. Amazing. Yes, perfect. Then let's go ahead and let's commit. Git commit -m, and this is going to be query stock stocks data on home screen. Perfect. The next step is going to be, now if I press on one of these stocks, if I go to the details, for example, NVIDIA, we see that it doesn't display it because the details page that we can see under the symbol here, they are still working with the dummy data. Well, let's go ahead and use and query our backend for information about this symbol. The process is as following. It's the same one, and let's repeat it. We go to our StepZen dashboard. Let's remove a query, and let's build the query that we want. This one is not going to be code. It's going to be code because we're going to only use one symbol. The symbol that we're going to use is going to come from the variable called symbol of type string. We take this variable and we send it to our query. The field that we're going to get back is going to be the same name, symbol, close, and percent change. Where is it? Percent change. For now, that's the only thing that we need to know about the stock on this screen. Let's go ahead and copy this query, and let's go in our application. We're going to go on the detail screen, which is our app and this symbol. We need to import two things, the use query and the GraphQL from Apollo client. And first we're going to need to define the query that we want to run using the GQL. Let's paste it, the one that we created using StepZen dashboard. And inside our stock details screen, we are going to again get the data, loading and error from, not from, but using the use query hook. Here in the use query, we need to provide the query that we want to run. And as the second variable, we need the variables which our query needs the symbol. So the symbol should be the one that we received from the path parameter. We don't need to hard code it here any longer. It's going to be the dynamic symbol that we found here. So the stock, we're no longer going to take it from the symbol, but we're going to do the following. First of all, manage the loading state. So if it's loading, return early and return an activity indicator, which is a spinner. If there is an error, let's return this stock with symbol could not be found or fetched or something like this. And then the stock is going to be equal to data dot the name of our query inside here. So data.code. So if I go now to NVIDIA, it's going to load and we're going to get the information about NVIDIA. If I'm going to go to Tesla, it's going to load. We're going to get information about Tesla. If I'm going to go back to NVIDIA, it's going to use the cached version. So we're not going to see the loading indicator, even though the query behind the scenes is being updated. So if there is any new data, it's going to automatically refresh, but the initial request here is going to be instant. So yes, just like that, we can, our detail screen is also integrated with our API, and we no longer need the top 5 dummy data. And I'm going to do that in the tabs index. We no longer need the top 5 dummy data there as well. So the first two screens, they are working with real data. So let's go ahead and do git add, git commit -m query stock details. Perfect. The last query that we need to send is this time series, right? And that is going to happen in our components graph. Well, as you can see, we don't only send GraphQL queries from from the screen level. We also send them from different components as well. So on the graph layer, we need the time series. So let's go ahead in our GraphQL. Let's start building our query. We have a time series here. For the interval and for the symbol, we're going to use again two variables here. Symbol of type string and interval of type string. These values we're going to send to here, interval, and for the symbol is going to be symbol. Let's open the object and let's see what information we're gonna get back. For the meta, I don't think we need anything from the meta because this is the symbol, the type, and so on. We only need the values for our graph, and we need the values from the values. We need the date time and we need the closing value. So if I send now a request like this, it's gonna be null because our interval we need to provide in variables here, and if it's required, we can put it as required here. So if I do here, if I put an exclamation mark, we're gonna see an error that the variable interval is required. And for the symbol as well, like let's make them required. I'm gonna take only one symbol and I'm going to send here the interval of 1 day. If I do run, we're gonna see a list of values, and the interval between the two of them is 1 actual day. Perfect. That means that let's go ahead and take this query, and in our graph, let's import two things. We're gonna import the use query hook, query, and the GraphQL from Apollo client. Let's define the query that we want to run here using GQL and paste the query string. Let's run this query at the top of our component, and we're gonna get data loading an error using the use query, and here we're gonna provide the query that we created. We also need some variables such as symbol. So in the variables we need the symbol, which at the moment we do not have it, so let's just do AAPL. And for the interval we need 1 day for now. Later on maybe it's going to be adjustable. Now let's do the following. The use state, I'm going to move it a little bit to the top, maybe even as the first line before the use query, because between this use query and before handling the points, I will do some checks here. So if it's still loading, I will return an activity indicator. If there is an error, I'm going to return a text saying error. Otherwise, I'm going to start by console logging the data. So if I go here to the Tesla, what's going on? Points.length. Yeah, here we don't have access to points.length, so I'm gonna remove them. If I go to IBM, for example, all right, the information is there. If we look in the console log data, we see that we have this time series. So instead of using the dummy data here that we imported from assets, let's map through data dot time series as we see it here, time underscore series. Just like that, we have real values. Apple. But all of them are for the symbol apple, because the graph doesn't yet know what symbol is it trying to render. So let's go ahead and receive the symbol through the properties. And we can also type that, hey, symbol should be of type string. Now, if we look at the application detail screen of our symbol, we're going to see where we render the graph, we have to send there the symbol that we are trying to render as well. And it's going to come from stock.symbol. And just like that, if we refresh, if I'm going to go to Apple, we're going to see the graph for Apple. If we look at AMD, we're going to see the graph for AMD. IBM, all of them are, yeah, I'm getting rate limited. Oh, wait. I'm still only querying Apple. I just need to remove Apple and double dots in order to take them. Yes. So Meta, we see it's going down. NVIDIA, also, it's a bit down. Tesla, we see it's going up. And we can move and see the actual values on different dates. Perfect. Yeah, I'm getting rate limited. I'm sending too many requests, but it's so fun to play with it. It looks so nice. Yeah, here, as you can see, I go above a line. But yeah, I will wait a bit and it's gonna go back. But now, as you can see, the graphs are also fetched from our GraphQL API, which is getting data from this TwelveData. Perfect, amazing. So let's go ahead and do the following. We are going to do git add, git commit -m, and this is going to be query graph data. At the end, if we have time, we are also going to implement a feature to switch the time period. For example, very similar to how Yahoo Finances is doing. So if you're checking something, you can check like 1 day interval, 5 day intervals, 1 month, 6 months, and so on. So if we have time, we are going to implement that. But the next feature that I want to implement, which will open the doors for you to a lot of new other possibilities, is being able to save stocks as favorites. And with this approach, with having to save something as favorite, we're going to integrate our StepZen GraphQL with a custom database. A custom database where we can write anything that we want, and this will allow you not only to use outside data that is coming from TwelveData, so not only using external data, but also adding on top of it custom features. For example, by connecting with a Postgres, I will show you how you can simply save favorites, but in future, you can implement things like being able to track your personal portfolio. So yes, information about the stocks is going to come from external API, but information about users' personal portfolio, you as the application will have to manage it. So for that, you will need a custom database where you will store this information and you will merge it in a way with external stock data. This is where IBM StepZen is actually bringing the most value in this project, because so far you might have been thinking like, why do we need the GraphQL layer on top of the REST API? Couldn't we simply query the REST API in our application? Well, we could, but in the situation where we need to bring data from multiple places, such as our situation right now, it would be very hard to do that. With GraphQL API, we're going to simply connect it with a different data source. In this case, we're going to connect it directly with a PostgreSQL database, and we're going to be able to merge this data together into one single unified GraphQL endpoint that we can query. And from the application, from the client side, from the front end, we don't need to think about where is this data coming from. We only know that, hey, we have this builder. With the documentation, it shows us what data is available, and we can query it. That's it. That's the power of GraphQL. So yes, we are getting into the last chapter of the tutorial, and here I'm talking connecting our GraphQL API to a custom database. To create you can create and host a Postgres database in a lot of different ways. You can even do it locally if you know how to set it up. But for simplicity, I'm going to use a service called neon.tech, which allows us to easily create Postgres databases that are stored serverless. So I'm going to use it in development. You can also use it in production. They are pretty powerful. But what I like about them is the user interface, which is really modern and easy to use. They also have a free tier where you can have one project and unlimited databases. So let's go ahead and sign up, create an account. I'm going to go ahead and I'm already signed up. After you create your account on neon.tech, this is where we will simply store our Postgres database. Let's call this project stocks. The database name, I can leave it like this. And let's press create project. That's it. Our PostgreSQL database has been initialized, has been deployed, and we are ready to connect to it. We don't want to connect yet because we don't have any tables yet. So if we go to the tables tab here, we see that we don't have any tables. Let's go ahead in the SQL editor to create some tables using some SQL. If you know SQL, you can create it here. If you are new to SQL, you can use ChatGPT. It's very good at creating these SQL queries. I have actually prepared a query, like some queries for you, that first creates a table called favorites with a column ID, symbol, and user ID. It inserts then a default value, and then it runs a query on it. So let's copy these 3 lines in our Neon console in the SQL editor. Let's remove everything that we have here and paste our code. Let's run the queries, and at the bottom we should see the result of the 3 queries. The first one, your query ran successfully. That's good. That was for creating the table. The second one was for inserting the table. And if we look at the third one, we should see one item here with ID 1, with symbol AAPL for Apple, and the user ID Vadim. And this record, if we go into the tables, now we should already see one table called favorites with this value. What this means is, that a user with ID Vadim favorite or saved as a favorite the symbol AAPL. So from our application, we would, for example, highlight the favorite here, and maybe in the second tab where we would want to see all the favorite stocks, we're going to query only the ones that they are favorite. Okay. Now we have our PostgreSQL. How do we connect it with our GraphQL? Well, if you look at the StepZen homepage, you can see that StepZen connects with different data sources. With REST, this is connecting with REST APIs. We already saw that. We did that in order to connect with our stock data provider, TwelveData. But StepZen also connects with SQL backends using another directive called dbQuery. That's mind-blowing because we can directly connect from StepZen to a database, and by using the same StepZen import database command, we can go ahead and automatically create our queries and mutations that will be executed and written to our database. So if we go to the documentation, we can see how we can go to PostgreSQL page, and here we can see how we can use StepZen import PostgreSQL to create a GraphQL API from a PostgreSQL database in minutes. So let's copy this command because it's super simple to do. Let's go in our project. Is it? No, it's not this one. It's this one. Yes, let's go here. Let's open the terminal and let's make sure to go to the API folder. Make sure if you do ls here, that not ls but pfd, that you are in the /API folder. Now, similar to how we did StepZen import curl, we were gonna do StepZen import PostgreSQL, enter. StepZen will ask us what is the host of your database. Let's go to our Neon console. Let's go to the dashboard, and here below you will see the connection string. Under the connection details, instead of connection string, let's choose parameters only. In parameter only, the first one is the PG host, which is the one that we need, the host of our database. Let's copy it, let's paste it here for StepZen. What is the username? The username is PG user from the dashboard. Copy it, paste it here. Password, I'm going to show it to you, but later I'm going to delete it. So let's press enter. And lastly, what is the database? The PG database is NeonDB. Enter. And for here, we can leave blank, so let's press enter. And the next question is if we want to link. No, we don't want to link at the moment. Press enter. That's it. And if we look into the other terminal where we have running StepZen start, if you don't have it open, just do StepZen start inside your API directory. And if you have done that, we can go to the dashboard. We can refresh our API. And under the queries, we see that we already have 4 more queries. Favorites by user ID, favorites by user ID and symbol, favorites list, and favorites paginated list. If I go to the favorites by user ID and say, hey, I want to query the ID, symbol, and user ID for favorites where the user ID is Vadim. I'm not gonna need here, or let's actually do here user ID is going to be a string. And the user ID, let's pass it to the user ID field here. And in the variables down below, let's actually prepare because we're going to need it in a moment. User ID, Vadim. So if I do that and run the query, the first time it takes a bit of time because it's spinning it up, but next queries, they are going to be much faster, and we see that, hey, there is already a favorite for the user with ID Vadim, and his favorite symbol is Apple. That's exactly what we need, and that's how simple it was to connect a PostgreSQL database to StepZen and create a GraphQL layer on top of the database. If we have a look at the things that was generated, we have a new folder called Postgres, and here in the Postgres we see a lot of queries, for example, favorites by user ID, we see favorites by user ID and symbol, favorite list and so on, but also mutation for deleting and inserting favorites. If you need like custom queries, you can create them yourself and simply provide the SQL query that should be run here. So it's very configurable. You can do a lot of custom queries that you need, but at the same time, StepZen is predefining some queries and some mutations for you to get started. And in our case, that's everything that we need. And where the favorite data is going to contain ID, symbol, and user ID. Before we integrate that, but no, let's actually integrate that, query it in our application, run some mutation, and after that we're gonna see some other benefits of StepZen, of how we can connect them together. For example, on tab 2, what I want to do is I want to send a request for all the favorite items, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the application, in tabs, tab 2, and here, let's go ahead and similar to the first list, I want to render a flat list of symbols, but only this time they should be my favorite symbols. So I still am gonna have like the flat list and the stack screen. So let's copy it from index to tab 2. I will put them here. Let's import stack from export router. The title is going to be favorite. The flat list, let's import it from React Native. Data is going to be empty array at the moment. We need to query it, and stock list item, let's import it here. So if I go here, we don't see anything. All right, well, what do we need? We need to query our favorite stocks. We saw the query already in our StepZen dashboard. By querying favorites by user ID, we can get a list of favorites. Perfect. So let's import use query and GQL from Apollo client. The query that we're gonna run is going to be GQL, and is going to be this one that we define in the dashboard. My query favorites by user ID, where we send the user ID, and we get back the symbols that the user favorite. Let's go ahead and run this query and get the loading, error, and data by calling use query and sending this query. The query needs a variable, so let's send variables as the second parameter, and the variable is going to be user underscore ID is Vadim. If loading, I'm going to return an activity indicator from React Native. If it's error, I'm going to return a text saying failed, or just simply error. Otherwise, let's go ahead and console log the data. Console log data. So if I go to my favorite screen, I don't see anything because it's still empty array here in the flat list. But if I look here, we see that, hey, we have some information. We have favorites by user ID, which is an array with actual data. So let's go ahead and do here const stocks equal data dot, and the field, it should be this one, favorites by user ID. And let's try to use it in the flat list as the stocks here. So if I go here, we see the Apple stock here. There are a bit of issues right now because we only see the symbol, we don't see the name and anything else. We're gonna handle that in a moment. But before we do, I will go ahead and do the following. I want to, when we go on one of the screens, if I press on the star, I want to, for example, here, if I press on the star, I want to add this symbol to the favorites. So far, we saw how we can run queries. To add a thing as a favorite, we need to write something. Writing or updating stuff with GraphQL is handled not by a query, but by a mutation. Let's go to the GraphQL dashboard. Let's remove here the query. And here under Add New, let's select a mutation. You might not see it properly. I'm going to do it like this. But yeah, under Add New, I'm going to select a mutation. Let's press plus. And now we see here two available mutations: delete favorites and insert favorites. If I'm going to select the insert favorites, and if I'm going to provide here for the symbol, I don't know, Google and user ID Vadim, and then I'm going to take ID, symbol, and user ID and run this mutation, we're going to see that this is going to create a new item in our database with this data. If I go to new on database and refresh my table, we're going to see that the mutation from GraphQL, let's open favorites, reached our database and it added the data here. So what we need to do is we need to run this mutation when the user presses on the star in the application. To do that, the last step in the mutation is to add here variables, for example, symbol. Let's call it symbol with $sign. Should be of type string and required, and the same user ID should be of type string and required. And now we take the symbol, and instead of hard coding it, we're gonna use symbol. And the same for user ID. We take user ID, and instead of hard coding, we put it here. Okay, so now that we have our mutation, let's copy it. And let's think, where do we need to handle that? I think we need to handle that on the components in the stock list item. Stock list item. Here we have this star, and the star, if we add the on press, on favorite pressed, let's define it here, const console warn hello. I'm still not sure, like, yeah, if we press exactly the icon, it's not gonna navigate. If we press anything else, it's going to navigate. So that's good. That means that when we do that, we want to run and execute the mutation of inserting, the mutation that we defined here, of inserting a favorite. So let's copy this mutation, and at the top, we're going to need two things. This time we don't need a use query. This time we need a use mutation and the GQL from Apollo client. Let's define the query, or in this case the mutation, using the GQL, and here we're gonna paste the mutation string. I'm not sure what's happening here. Stock list item. What? Expected. It's a bit weird, but I think it should work. Maybe something wrong with my prettier. GQL. Is it GQL? Oh, no, it shouldn't be import. It should be const. Okay, my bad. So now, using the use mutation hook, we need to define this one. We need to define this mutation here. const equal use mutation, we need to provide the mutation object, and we need to also provide here variables. Function that when executed will run the mutation, because we don't want to run it as soon as possible. We want to run it only when the user does something. And the second one is going to be the same data error and so on. I'm gonna leave it like this. And in the variables, if you know the variables ahead of time, you can provide them here. For example, for user ID, I can provide it here as Vadim. And actually the stock as well, like the symbol, I know it as well here. In some cases, you don't know the variables from the beginning. Maybe you need them to take from a state variable. So in that case, when running the mutation, we can also send and override some variables. In this case, stock.symbol. So when we press on favorite, let's simply run the mutation. If I do that, and I will press on the Tesla, not sure what's happening, but let's check the database. Let's refresh and check the favorites database. We see a new item added with the symbol Tesla and the user ID Vadim. Perfect, that's exactly what we wanted. And again, you can send here different variables as well, if you know them only when the user does the action and you don't know them right of the gate. But in our case, it's a bit easier. So this way, we have added, we have executed a mutation and added a favorite var. Now if I go here, maybe if I will refresh, and if I go to the tab 2, we should see 3 of them, Apple, Google, and Tesla. But at the same time, we don't know all the information about these symbols, because if we want the name or the price or the change, we would have to, at the moment, when querying the, I'm gonna look into the history to check my query for favorites by user ID. If I'm gonna do that, like I only have access to the symbol here. Even if I look in the builder, it's only the symbol. I cannot get the name and so on, because this query from the database doesn't have that things. So an option would be to send another request to the code after we get this the favorites to the code to get details about that code. But that goes against the principles of GraphQL of having to send one request and getting all the data that we need. So we don't want to send multiple requests. We want to get all the data we need in one single request. With StepZen, the benefit is that we can connect data from different sources, we can connect between them, and this way creating a unified schema that combines this data. So what do I mean by that? In the Postgres index here, I want our favorites to have one extra field with details about the code. The type of this code is going to be, if I look into the code, it should be, I want all this information. So the type is going to be code. But how do I get this data here? Well, we can use a directive called materializer. And the materializer helps us connect different queries in one. For example, with materializer, we need to specify what query do we want to run to get this code. The query is called, if I look in the code, is called code. And it has, remember, the code has a property called symbol. So let's go in Postgres. We say that, hey, I want to run a query code to get more information about this favorite, but that one also has some arguments. So arguments is going to be an array where we say the name of the argument, which comes from the code. I will check here. The name is symbol. So the name symbol should be equal to the field from our object, which is symbol here. So whenever we are gonna ask for the code of a favorite, it's gonna take the symbol from here and it's gonna run a query called code by sending the symbol to the parameter symbol. Does it make sense? Hopefully it does. And here, let's see, StepZen has been deployed. And if I will copy this query and refresh, we see that now the favorites by user ID has a code which I can get, for example, name, I can get close, I can get % change and so on. So if I send this request now, I get all my favorites as I was getting them, but at the same time I get the details of the code. And all of this data is coming from two different sources. This information about favorites is coming from our custom PostgreSQL, and the information about the code itself is coming from an external API called TwelveData that gives us information about the stocks. So just like that, we get more information about them. We need name, symbol, and close. So let's copy this code from here. Let's go to our source application tabs. In the tab 2, where we have our favorites, in the request, in the favorites by user, after all of this, I'm going to add the code information. So now I don't even need this user and symbol. I will only go ahead and map from favorites to the favorite codes. So in the stocks, favorites by user, I'm gonna do dot map. For every favorite, I will only take favorite dot code because that's what we need here. And just like that, we have our codes here. So if I'm gonna add meta here, and if I'm gonna refresh, you can also do that, it will refresh automatically. It's going to be added here, but again, I'm getting rate limited. So even though in the Neon database, I should see the meta, because I'm rate limited, I don't have a premium API meta. I don't see it here, but after a couple of refresh or a couple of time, it's going to query it properly. As you can see, yeah, now I'm getting hardly rate limited. So yes, just like that, we saw how we can use Materializer to connect two fields from different parts of our API, and you can do the same vice versa. For example, in the code index, for example, under a code, we can add here a field called isFavorite, and we can query this field using the answer is going to be let's do favorite, and the answer is going to be of type favorites. And we're gonna get it using Materializer. We're gonna do a query called favorites by user ID, not favorites by user ID and symbol. So favorites by user ID and symbol, and for the arguments, we're gonna pass their user ID and symbol. For the symbol, we're gonna take it from here, okay? But for the user ID, we need to, I will probably hard-code it Vadim here for a moment. So now let's check if arguments invalid symbol. Oh, no. It should be another object. Another object where name is user ID and field, or maybe not field, value. Can it be value? Is going to be Vadim. Unknown field. User ID value. Can I do here? How to hard code it? Value field. materializer. Let me check quickly the docs. Materializer, combine. So arguments field. How would you yeah, like I don't know how to hard code it in this situation. I'd have to check the API, but this way we can have the vice versa. Like whenever we query a code, we can check the favorite. And did it deploy? Yeah, it has the user ID, does not have a mapping. Favorite field selection requires a favorite head. Oh, and it's going to be an array of favorites. But it needs the user ID, which I don't know how to take. That's also called symbol, which doesn't make sense, but just for me to see that it's deploying. Yes, and now that means that whenever we, in any parts of our application where we call a code, we can also take the favorites. By refreshing, I will have access to favorite here, and it's going to tell me if there is an item favorite in the API. So in this case, we know that Apple is not favorite, and so on. But we need to update it in order to properly send the user ID to that request. So that's how we can connect them between each other. And based on this favorite field, you can either highlight the star or not. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and do git add, git commit, favorite with PostgreSQL favorites. All right, guys, so that was everything that I wanted to teach you today. So in this tutorial, what we have done is we have implemented the stock tracking application, and on the home screen, we are querying a list of stocks. We can check the details of them, and I encourage you to continue building this project because you can add some small features that would improve a lot the application, because for now we can only display these stocks, but by simply adding an input field here where the user can manually type a symbol, you can allow him to check any kind of stock data. And yes, now we see that we not only take information about the stock, but also display it on the graph with more information about that stock. We can also favorite them and they will appear in our favorites. So yeah, that's the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It's going to help us a lot reach more developers. And I want to remind you that next Tuesday, a full stack, very in-depth tutorial that we worked for the last 3 months is dropping. So make sure to stay tuned for that tutorial. Thank you very much, StepZen, for sponsoring this video. I'm rushing because I really have to go and end the live stream before. Yeah. So let's continue our discussion in the comment sections. I'm gonna try to answer as many comments as possible. And yeah, see you next week with more tutorials like this. All right, guys, have a nice evening and keep building awesome applications, keep learning and keep rocking. Bye bye, guys.